Welcome to our podcast about the systems in the games we play and how those inspire the ones we make. I'm Sam.
And I'm CJ, and this is Systems in Play. How's it going, folks? Today, we're joined by a very special guest, twitch.tv/TerrificBlake.
What's up?
How's it going, Blake?
I don't know when I need to reply there or actually pop in. It's going pretty well.
Me neither, dude.
That was probably our most successful intro yet, I'll be
I
honest.
know, right?
Intros are hard. Like, I don't even do them on Twitch. I'm not allowed. Just kind of like, and it started. I do need to figure something out, but yeah.
It took us like 7 episodes to get an intro.
And even then, it took us 10 to get it right. So, for the people that don't know, what are you about, Blake? Give us 3 games. Our first episode, we did 5 games. Give us 3 games. Any games.
Pick
Top
a game,
games,
any
best
game.
games you're playing, whatever.
Alright, so one game recently I picked up that I still haven't got to actually put as many hours in as I want to is Crow Country. I don't know if you guys have seen anything about that.
Ooh, I do like me Crow Country.
I have not played it, but that is very high on my list of things to play.
It came out, I saw it, and it just had a style that I was like, it feels like home. Because like survival horror is one of those games I grew up on. I played a lot of the PlayStation era of like Resident Evils, your Silent Hills, games like that. My mom played them, so I was like, these are cool. And like it's got that style, but with more modernized mechanics. Like it does got tank controls, which is a godsend, honestly. But that is a game that has been pretty high on my list recently.
That one came out at such an unfortunate time because I think there were several big name indie games came out all within the same week. It was like Animal Well and Pepper Grinder and Crow Country. That wasn't the only ones either. There were a handful of others, and I'm still catching up with that list.
This one, I didn't even hear the news when it came out. I just saw it on my Steam page. I saw the little art. I was like, this looks like retro Project Zomboid-esque type deal. I clicked on it. It's beautiful little looking game.
See, I didn't even think about that. Project Zomboid does have a very similar style, but that was the same for me though. It just kind of popped up my Steam page, and I didn't know anything about it. Loaded it. I was like, it takes place at a carnival. It's a really cool setting. I was like, I'm gonna try it out because Steam's got an amazing refund policy. So I was like, jumped in it. And I've just been enjoying it. It's a solid game.
I know it's taken a lot of influences from some pretty big games, which you've already mentioned. Taking influences is hint the theme of today. But what would you say it's closer to? Because I hear Resident Evil and I hear Silent Hill. Which one do you think it's closer to, if either?
I would say Silent Hill. If it the horror that it entails is more Silent Hill feeling me. The mechanics feel more Resident Evil though to me.
Okay.
Like the inventory system, the healing system, all that stuff feel a lot more similar to Resident Evil.
So, in terms of horror, where does it kind of rank for you? Is it pretty spooky, or is it more of horror aesthetics in an otherwise not scary game?
I'd say horror aesthetics, but it does have the good setting of ambiance, like the noises in the background. It does, just because it's hard to pull off horror in a game setting like this, like the style graphics and everything of the more modern age.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, looking at it, I don't see myself getting scared playing it, but I do see myself being creeped out.
Yeah, that's where I think it really evolves into its creep factor. Also, one big thing is I love the uncanny valley effect, and it's got a lot of that, like elongated limbs, like people that just don't seem fully right. And I enjoy that type of horror.
I'm a big fan of that as well. Maybe I'll save Crow County till a little closer to October.
That'd be good time to play it. Yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to that. Well, what's next on your list?
Yeah.
Another one that actually I think just came out with its second game now, or it's in early access, but Hades. That's a big one for me.
Oh yeah, another banger.
That is so. As is, and we'll get a little more into the roguelike genre, but it's rare that you see a game like a Hades where it's a roguelike, so it resets every time, but it's got an evolving story. I really enjoy story
Yes.
aspects in games, and it was so cool to see that unfold.
That is rare, yes.
Hades has to be like the most genius story concept for a roguelike game. Every other one just kind of ignores it, or it does a pretty mid job. And and the fact that they use Greek mythology as the framing is so good.
I do think they probably chose that at a good era, because like a lot of us, like I was a big Greek mythology nerd in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and like a lot of the era kids have grown up and have like disposable income, so Hades I think just released at that great time, kind of capitalize on that, along with the fact that like I love when games can define their mechanics through storytelling.
Yes. We kind of talked about that a little bit last week, where, dying in games, so often it's just, it kind of happens and the game pretty much ignores the fact that you died. And I love when they just go, that little bit of extra effort to make it make sense in the context of the world and add a little story component to it. And Hades does such a good job of that.
It does, and like also return to the hub world and like be like, I want to talk to all these individuals again, because they have new conversation dialogue. I've unlocked more information from them. I want to give that. I don't remember what the item is because it has been a while since I played Hades, but I can give them gifts or whatever, and it will further progress their story.
I remember that being the best part about Hades 1 was when you get a power up, like, oh, please talk to me. Please notice me, senpai.
Listen, one of the best characters in that game was by far Medusa. She was one of my favorites. Just a floating head was genius.
Yes. So you've been playing Hades 2?
I have not, sadly. I'm actually I tend to, when it comes to early access in games, I don't tend to jump in on that just because I don't want to play it early access and get burnt out and miss more content.
Yeah. I tend to shy away from early access as well.
Yeah. I know it helps developers, and I really should participate in early access stuff more often, but it's hard, especially with like as many games that release on a day. I don't know. I say day to day, but on a month-to-month basis.
No, a day-to-day. You're right. Anymore, dude.
It's really hard to find the time to play that game, then go play a different game, and then come back to it whenever it's out of early access, especially after I've played the initial game.
Yeah, agreed.
Like, I bought Baldur's Gate 3 in early access, and I just customized my character, never played it, just because I knew I'd burn myself out.
That's a smart way to do it. That's why they released the character creator for Dragon's Dogma as a demo, and that was it. That was the only demo you got.
That was genius. That's a good hook, honestly, for people to buy a game. Because that almost got me to buy Dragon's Dogma.
It's like, well, shit, I made a guy, now I want to play as him.
Yeah.
See, that's not me. I'll just make the guy over and over again and then never actually play the game.
Catch me in Mii Maker for hours, not playing anything else.
I spent significantly more time making my character in Elden Ring than I did actually playing Elden Ring, unfortunately. Which is both a testament to how little I played Elden Ring and how long I spent in the character creator.
I wish I could say that, but I think I got like 700 hours in Elden Ring.
Oh my god. It's amazing.
You're just the guy for today's topic. Wow.
Okay. And speaking of that, going to my last game, by far my favorite is going to be Bloodborne. That is like top tier, my favorite game of that I've ever played.
I believe that's the only Souls-like that Sam got significantly far into. I think. Question mark.
Yes. Well, I played it. I was visiting a friend, and we tried to get as far as we could within that weekend, and made it decently far. But got through a few bosses, and I got to say, is really fun. Really enjoy it. I love the more Victorian theme of it, with kind of the like classic Dark Souls stuff. Is so good, so good.
Yeah, the setting definitely sells me, and like I enjoy the parry mechanic a lot more than I enjoyed the iframe rolling from your typical Souls-like games, where it's still got the iframes with the backstepping dodging, and they're not as prevalent, and you're more leaning towards aggressive gameplay. Kind of like Sekiro a little bit. Well, Sekiro you play more defensively still, but it feels more aggressive.
Sekiro's a whole nother beast.
Well, that is an excellent transition to the topic for the week, which is going to be generally like an introduction to the Souls-like genre. Talking generally about what a Souls-like game is and leading that into a broader discussion about genre in games and how
Mm,
genres are formed, what a genre actually is, and what it means. And yeah, we're just gonna get into it.
yeah. So, let's see. I forgot what I was gonna say. You nailed it. That was it.
I couldn't not take the segue.
The first question that we had for part one is, what is your favorite FromSoft game? And Blake literally answered that already. So,
I did. I mean, I can go further into Bloodborne and kind of like what makes it what truly makes it like FromSoft's like FromSoft. I'm trying to think what their secret recipe when it comes to making games. To me, is a lot of their secret lore, like the items hiding the lore, and like you're just playing the game. There's not a lot of cutscenes. You don't know the story, but when you start reading, you start digging, you start to find that. And Bloodborne was the reason why it was almost intrinsic, that game, because the lore is Lovecraftian. I love Lovecraftian stuff as is, and like reading into that, like more cryptic messages and everything, it felt like it was the perfect setting for how FromSoft tells games.
I never thought about it in that light, but you're very right, honestly.
CJ, what's your favorite FromSoft game? And do you have a lot of experience playing them?
I probably Dark Souls 3 would be my favorite. That's just the one I've spent the most amount of time in. I wouldn't say I have near as much experience as my good friend Blake here. Because, dude, watching him stream and like some of the shit that he does, it's like a level above. I also don't think I've ever actually beat a FromSoft game, as much as I have played them all, which notoriously bad at beating video games, good at playing them. But I'd have to say Dark Souls 3 was my favorite. Just because it was the first one that I really got good at. Wasn't the first one I played. I did play Demon Souls, which was like FromSoft's, like one of their first Souls-likes, which wasn't even a Dark Souls game, surprisingly. Am I correct, Blake?
Yeah, that was released in I think 2006. That was technically their first Souls-like game, and then right after that came Dark Souls.
Yeah, first Souls-like game, not even a Souls game. I did play that. I was really bad at it. The dude, I was like really small, and the dude at GameStop was like, "Are you sure you want to buy this, son?" I said, "Yes, sir." And then I quit playing it that night because it was really hard.
I think we all got those memories of the GameStop employees being like unsure on purchases. Like I had that with Mortal Kombat.
Yeah,
that's pretty fair.
That's fair.
My experiences would be, sir, are you sure you want to buy Boom Blocks for the Wii? This game's not very good.
I've had that too. Brink from Bethesda. Enjoyed that game, but that GameStop employee was just very adamant about me not buying it.
But we have New Vegas right here.
For real. Shout out to the GameStop employees that stop children from buying shit games.
For real.
Truly.
Shout out to the children that don't give a fuck and play the shit games.
I had a lot of fun with Boom Blocks.
Yeah.
Listen, that King Kong game that was based on the movie was fun. Okay, I enjoyed that one.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely have a bad video games episode in me at some point that I would love to talk about.
Yes.
Bad asterisk.
I think that would cross over a lot with our movie tie-in video games. Honestly.
No. Movie tie-in games are great.
Yes,
never any issues there.
Never bad.
Never bad.
So what about you, Sam? Do you have any FromSoft experience? I know you said you played Bloodborne probably the most.
Yeah. I played Bloodborne I say quite a bit. I played it more than any of the others. I had a friend kind of watching over my shoulder and telling me, more there for like moral support, but also pointing me to, a couple odds and ends as I was playing. I did enjoy it quite a bit. Literally him like shouting at me to get good and to not give up was a good motivator. I played a bit of Elden Ring. I ended up kind of hitting a wall within my own skill level and wasn't able to get over it and then gave up. yeah, as I've said before on the show, I'm not the best at games, and I don't have the most wherewithal for things that are particularly punishing.
Mm,
So I don't tend to get super far in FromSoft games before I give up.
that's fair. I feel bad now that you've told me your story about your friend telling you over your shoulder in Bloodborne. Because if you recall, I was over your shoulder in Dark Souls 3 when you played Dark Souls 3, and I was like, dude, you should totally pick the thief.
That's awesome.
I feel terrible.
I take it the thief is probably like the best character, and you
Yeah,
made it too
hands
easy on
down.
me.
Hands down.
Hands down.
Uh,
Um, so I don't have a ton of experience with the Souls-like series, but I
mm,
know that it's really popular, and I know that for a lot of people, like the present company included, that is the peak genre for them. I wonder, just like, what are the experiences that you have in that game that keep you coming back to Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Bloodborne, like those games specifically, but just kind of like in that realm, what keeps bringing you back? What is appealing about it to you?
For me, there's two major aspects. It's the overcoming the challenge. Like my friend that I play with a little bit, he puts in a good way that you're just grinding your head against a grindstone until either you break or the grindstone breaks. And like it's that adrenaline pump. Like good example is when the DLC release, I was fighting, I know, Mesmer in Elden Ring. I think I fought him for 4 or 5 hours before finally beating him. But I remember getting close and then getting a little bit
I was there for
closer.
that.
And just, yeah, seeing that gradual progression feels astounding. And then, like, whenever you finally reach that peak of being like, they're within reach. And then beating them, your
Mm-hmm.
heart's racing, your hands are shaking. And it just, that feeling. And then the other drawing aspect is the fact that, like, replaying it and then knowing the story
Mm-hmm.
adds a different perspective to the game to me. Because now that I know, like I've researched now the DLC's stuff, I read some of the lore in the items. I've also watched some lore videos because I'm not great at piecing puzzles together, so lore videos are my best friend. And
Mm.
knowing Mesmer's past, fighting him puts him in a different light.
That's not an aspect I really ever got deep enough in a game to experience, the lore that is. So, would you say that a lot of the lore is in game, or is it mostly like kind of hidden in books or item descriptions, things like that?
A lot of it's hidden in the item description. There's small tidbits of like information you get from dialogue. I know in Elden Ring there was, I think, opening sequence. They say something about, I don't remember exact. Oh, the Leafs or something like that in the open sequence of Elden Ring. And
Hmm.
now apparently the person that narrates the opening sequence of Elden Ring was what is called a dry leaf. We know because of the DLC Dane Dryleaf. We know more about their backstories.
So
I
they
see.
literally gave you backstory for the narrator at the beginning?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like how
That's
the
cool.
leaves fall or something. It's a big thing for the dry leaves, I think, or something.
That's really cool.
Wow. Yeah. I never ever got into the lore of any of the FromSoft games. What keeps me coming back is definitely what Blake said, where you just grind your head against the wall until you get just like 2 seconds of release after killing a boss. It's like a really, really slow roller coaster ascent, and then the world's fastest incline, and it's fun every single time.
It's also great that feeling of like, I can't tell you how many times I would fight a boss and die and be like, well, that wasn't my fault. And then by the time I've respawned, I'm like, that was my fault. I rolled wrong. And
Hmm.
immediately knowing your mistakes.
Yeah, yeah. That and Fashion Souls. That's what keeps me coming back. Every time I get a new weapon, every time I get a new piece of armor, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm gonna use this for like 10 minutes and find a new piece.
Listen, Fashion Souls is what I lived for. Like, but the entire DLC was a slew of new armors. I changed it up so often. It was so awesome.
Mm, hell yeah.
I am a big fan of like armor customization in games, or just like finding cool pieces of armor.
Mm,
That was a good chunk of my Elden Ring experience was spent becoming a wizard and then looking for a wizard's hat. I did not ever find one.
There's a few in game, but I think the Snow Witch had the best hat. Ronnie's.
Mm.
Mm.
Just because it's huge and it's, I love it. It matches very few outfits in the game, but it's great when you get to put it on.
If I recall, I for the longest time wore the like scarab helmet. It's a helmet that gives you negative stats. I think it's one of the only ones in the game that do that, and I was dedicated to wearing that for most of my playthrough.
That's amazing.
Yeah, most of the helmets don't. I know that I think Dark Souls 1 had one like that too, and it was the Helmet of Avarice, the one that looked like a mimic.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one, yeah.
Yep, it increased your discovery, but it also had a negative effect. I do not remember. I think it was constant HP drain or something. I do not remember.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, I don't think I ever used that one. I like that it's like a mimic with a big tongue. Its tongue was sticking out, and it had like tongue physics. So when you like move around, the tongue just sort of flops. It's really funny.
All right, y'all are making a good case for these games. Head Against the Grindstone, not so much. Funny mimic hat. But, all right, I'm in.
But other experience with the game, like recently I've been playing RL1 with the Seamless Co-op mod because they've updated it to run the DLC. And we've beat the Divine Beast, we beat Rolana, and we beat now Commander Gaius. But the boss has given us the most trouble is Scottree Avatar. And even though like I've already kind of talked to you guys a little bit about this, but I've invested 12 hours now into that fight, like in 2 different days, 6-hour sessions. Just me and my friend is stubborn. He's like, I'm not changing my build. Me, on the other hand, I'm like, I'm putting this item on now, trying this new item. I'm going to try a shield build. I'm going to try this pike. We're throwing everything at this wall to break it down. But, like, I know that those 12 hours will pay off in that, like, minute of, that 1 minute of the redeeming factor being like, it's beats. You have that message, it's like, enemy failed, pop up in the game. And it all leads up to that.
Okay. Quick for the people at home, what is an RL1 run?
Fair. RL1, it's an acronym, stands for Ruin Level 1.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, like, you have to choose a certain class in all the Dark Souls, I think, where it's you choose the Wretch in Elden Ring. Dark Souls, I think it was the Depraved or something like that.
That was me.
Yeah, because all classes tend to start above level 1 besides that class.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Dark Souls 3, when you chose Thief, you weren't level 1 whenever you chose Thief. But
you were technically higher level, but
yeah, exactly. It wasn't amazing. So, but RL1 stands for Ruin Level 1. There's also SL1, which is Dark Souls version of Ruin Level 1. In other words, Souls Level 1. I don't think Blood Echo Level 1 ever became a thing, so I think they just still called it SL1 for Bloodborne. But that's all it means. Basically, you don't level up ever throughout the game. You can use talismans, you can use tears, you can use anything at your disposal, and it can be RL1. You can use summons for all you care, but you cannot level up.
So your shit are stats. Your stats are shit for the whole game, right?
Yeah, and basically you can only take 1 hit before you die. That's the biggest discerning factor. It separates a playthrough from being
separates boys from men.
Yeah, it separates playthroughs of being flawed but beaten, like having to use your flask to heal yourself and everything, like taking a hit here and there just to get a hit off as well, and making it where you have to run this flawless. You can't take a hit.
Oh, that sounds really freaking hard.
Yeah. So it sounds a tiny bit challenging. So you've taken this very challenging game and you're like, this isn't enough for me. I need more. This is too easy now.
Listen, there was someone that just beat the game with a dance pad and a controller simultaneously on DLC. She beat the last boss of the DLC with a dance pad and a controller.
Oh my!
To play 2 different screens.
That's amazing.
Oh my god!
It's a little bit of that competition too, and like this is where that like skill issue thing comes from for a lot of people. and like it is gatekeepy at times, 100% is, but it is that pleasantry of being like, I beat this when others couldn't.
Yeah,
That's fair.
that makes sense. So we talked about Bloodborne, obviously, and a little bit about Elden Ring. What about some of these other FromSoft games that aren't technically Dark Souls? So Sekiro mainly comes to mind, but I guess Demon Souls is technically not a Dark Souls game from what you were saying either. Um,
Mm.
are you guys into those as well, or are those kind of like the ugly step kid that nobody really wants to talk about in those communities?
This kind of goes a little bit more like what I was talking about Bloodborne, where like it's kind of how you play it and how you like. Sekiro is more based in like fast paced combat. You're doing a lot of deflecting, and with Sekiro, where like dodging is your main mechanic. In Dark Souls and Elden Ring,
Mm-hmm.
there's no pleasing factor of dodging besides like you don't get hit. While Sekiro is weird as it sounds, that like ting sound you get every time you deflect a move. There's just a little bit of a dopamine that just pump through my brain
Mm.
when I'm playing it. Like you feel like a samurai. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
I
get
have
that.
watched a good bit of gameplay from Sekiro, and it does look incredibly satisfying to watch high level combat.
That is a big thing
Mm.
for me too. And to watch at high level combat and to be like, I want to get to that level,
Mm-hmm.
just because it just seems fun and enjoyable to be able to pull that off. And like I said, the sound design was, I feel like, the biggest factor for Sekiro. I mean,
Sekiro was almost more like cinematic in its fights than the other ones. And it's also single player only, right? It's the only FromSoft, I think, that's just not multiplayer at all.
you are right. Yes.
And it also removed the Fashion Souls aspect, so
They did, but at the same time, you got a character out of it. Whenever you
Yeah.
remove that like aspect of to be able to design your own character, you inherently start building a story rather
Mhm.
than just a tarnished via Elden Ring's terms. But
Mhm.
whenever you say cinematic, to one fight that I think of a lot, and I hate this in most Souls like, but they're called what's a gimmick boss, which a gimmick boss has to be defeated usually a certain way. Elden Ring's gimmick boss was like, I'm trying to remember his name. Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy. You have to use the Serpent Hunter to kill him. Uh, Dark Souls had a few gimmick bosses. A good one example. Dark Souls 1 was Bed of Chaos. I don't know if you guys have ever watched any Dark Souls 1 playthroughs, but like you have to. There's two like little seeds to the side of the arena. You have to kill. I don't know if they're seeds. I don't remember exactly what the Bed of Chaos is, but they're little things. You kill those, and then it opens up the main cocoon thing. It's a little worm, and you kill it. But there's other than that, there's this huge tree that's swinging around the arena that you have to dodge. So like it doesn't have a true health bar. They're instant kills when you hit them, but there's a puzzle to it.
Oh,
Feels
I
almost
see.
like an old like 3D platformer boss or something where you have to do a super specific thing in order to beat them.
If you played Dark Souls 3 1, I think it's Yorm, the Storm Giant.
Yorm, yeah.
He is a gimmick boss too because you have to use I think what's called the Stormcaller to defeat him.
Mm.
I don't remember the name of the weapon.
Or you just get Onion Knight.
Yeah, Onion Knight's also a solid thing for that fight. But that's where Sekiro really succeeded in its cinematic aspect of it. Like the Divine Dragon, even though it was a gimmick fight, it felt and just looked so amazing.
I never actually fought the Divine Dragon. I don't remember how far I made it in Sekiro.
I'm trying to think. The Divine Dragon also just in general the lead up to him because there was that area with like lightning and everything, and then there was the giant koi fish in that pond near him.
Oh god, that fish scared the shit out of me.
Listen, if I saw a giant koi fish that could swallow me, it would too.
It scared the hell out of man.
So you mentioned that Sekiro has an actual character, and so it has more of a story. Does it still have kind of the hidden lore that the other Dark Souls games, or is that another trade-off that it makes where it's more explicit in the story?
It's definitely more explicit. It's more open to. Sekiro was a good opening ground for a lot of people to come into the Soul genre because it opened up a lot of the gatekeeping aspects of it, where like, oh, the story's not hidden behind these lord or these items and lore dumps of bosses, like reading the remembrances. You're not reading a book consistently. And there are those items that you can read to get kind of inherently get some story. You can look at the world design. That's another big thing with like Souls likes, where like looking at the world will tell you part of the story, like
Mm-hmm.
this ruined building, like how this happened, and just piecing small things together like that. While Sekiro, it helped open up that, like I said, it basically sprinkled in the lore dumps of items
Mm-hmm.
while still having an open cinematic for people just to play without reading anything.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I see why people would say that one is more open, like the gateway drug, like you said. I've definitely heard that before.
Yeah. It spawned the whole should games have an easy mode, should all games have an easy mode debate because so many new players were playing a FromSoft game for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's actually a good point too. In Elden Ring, like I feel like Sekiro and Elden Ring brought in a lot of our new Souls basis for two different
Mhm.
reasons. Sekiro more for the story aspects, and like the gameplay for Elden Ring, like it was more opening for newcomers, where you could step away from a boss, you could go level up. There was more to explore. It being open world, where most Souls like were definitely more linear.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't
Mhm.
stuck on a boss. It wasn't as much of that banging your head against a wall till it breaks. It was much more like, you know what, this wall is kind of sturdy. Let's try and make myself more sturdy.
Oh, that's fair. I will counter that by saying, uh, it's cool that you can, see a boss and you're not good at, you're like, okay, maybe I need to come back. I did that with every boss. And then I realized, I think maybe I'm supposed to be doing good. And then the one I invested a lot of time into, I don't remember their name. My friend was like, oh, no, you should really not be doing that right now. Like that is not where you need to be. Um, and that was around the time I'm like, I can't win this game.
You were definitely one of the people that first stepped out that fought Tree Sentinel, I feel like.
Yeah. I do remember that.
And that's fine. That was FromSoft's way of telling you, like as weird as it sounds,
Mm-hmm.
it's also a little bit of their storytelling, the way they tell the games mechanically without a tutorial as well. That this is a game that you're not supposed to fight the boss until it just dies. You can step away from this.
Mm.
It being an
Mhm.
open world boss gave you the ability just to run away from them. And it
Mhm.
being the first boss you encountered, they made it stronger. That way you could have the aspect that like sometimes you're going to hit this wall, and that's fine. Go find something else.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Don't worry, I wish they could have said that just in a pop-up menu, because I did fight the Tree Sentinel a few times on my try too. But I'm also stubborn, so I fought him like for 2 hours because I was like, I'm gonna beat him, and it didn't happen.
Yeah. So that's a good point to transition kind of to the next section of the script, script asterisk. We already talked about what you like about FromSoft games. Which is the difficulty, which is the lore. Mechanically, is there anything that you like about the games, whether that be dodge rolling, parrying, weapons, from a more like what you're doing with your hands and with the mechanics? What do you like about the games or dislike?
Hmm.
That the dislikes are gonna be hard for me. I will say the dislike comes down to like a lot of model reusing. You see a lot of that happening across all Dark Souls. Like some
Mm.
Dark Souls stuff you find in Dark Souls 3
Oh
are
man.
not to say models, but animations reused into Elden Ring, which I definitely know streamlines processes, but it being a completely different IP,
Hmm.
to me hurts the IP a bit. If it was still a Dark Souls, I don't think it would hurt it as much.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I'm actually really surprised to hear that that's the case.
Mhm.
I won't say it happens a lot, but it is something you do see happen occasionally, where movesets are reused or boss concepts are reused. And one of the big things being boss fights in Souls games, whenever a boss concept is reused, it kind of hurts me. Like
Mm.
a good example of this was Pontiff Sullivan from Dark Souls 3, and kind of his similarities to like Rolana, or even part of Radahn's fight. There were concepts in the Pontiff Sullivan fight that resembled both those fights.
Oh, I didn't even put that together, but you're right. I remember loving Pontiff.
He was a really cool fight, and like he with Rolana's like dual blades, her fire and her magic or whatever it was. I don't remember exactly now. But
Mhm.
Pontiff had a very similar setup where he had those dual blades and even similar combos.
Hmm.
While Radon, he had a best way I can describe it's like a mirror image move where like you saw a mirror image of him strike and then he swung.
Mhm.
And his
Interesting.
and Pontiff Sullivan full spawned a spectral version of himself and did the same thing.
I
I
see.
would not have noticed that actually. But yeah, you're right.
See, a lot of people don't, but to me that does, like, whenever I think about it, I'm like, I'm basically fighting a boss I fought.
Right.
That's fair.
Right. And I, it seems like the game rewards you for being really paying attention to details, and that's how you learn the lore. That's how you become familiar with the game. And so I think probably a lot of people who have actually beaten the game or made it particularly far would notice something like that. Oh, that makes sense.
My other main dislike, and this is a completely Miyazaki thing, and I'll tell you the story behind this. Cause I'm not like a lot of people have heard this, but the way the multiplayer works, because I have a mod for my Elden Ring
Mm-hmm.
that makes it seamless. In other words, you can jump into a game with another player, and you can wander the entire world by yourself, separate or together with them.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
and that's how I play RL1. Because like as much as I feel like I'm above average on your Elden Ring players, so I play with a co-op partner to take the aggro a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But with that being said, the way that the system is originally designed is you can only summon them in certain areas, usually near boss fights. They come in, they help you, they defeat the boss. If you were summoned to the world and you have not defeated the boss yet, when you defeat it in their world, it doesn't defeat it for your world.
Yeah. That
That's
was
a little
annoying. Me and my
Yeah.
brother tried to play multiplayer, but we had to keep like switching over to like whose world we're in, and it just got old.
In general, games that do stuff like there's a few games I think State of Decay or something does something similar where like your world progression doesn't grow with their world, and it sucks because if you start a multiplayer playthrough, you constantly have to make sure you're playing with them, otherwise you don't technically are making any progress.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And the little thing about Miyazaki here, because like his entire thing with that gameplay was that he had broken down on the side of a road at one point, like a random country road, and the thing is like probably 3 a.m. or something. It was late at night. Someone drove up, helped him, fixed his car, drove off. He never got their name or anything like that. But he's like, this is how I want all my multiplayers to be. Is this random person driving up to me on the side of a road?
I love that story so much.
It's definitely one of my favorite stories, I will say.
That's pretty amazing.
I hope it's true.
I hope it is too. From everything I've heard, it is true, and everything I've looked up, it is. But like, I'll be so sad if it ever comes out. It's like, no, it's not.
Okay, what inspired Miyazaki to put a poison swamp in every game? What story made that happen? You have a bad experience.
Probably the
in
same
the swamp?
story that makes him take everyone's feet out in the games. Okay.
What?
Oh yeah.
Explain.
A lot of boss fights you see in the game. It's an ongoing joke that Miyazaki likes feet because a lot of the boss fights have really prevalent feet. And if you look at Demon Souls, like she's dangling her feetsies.
Oh, Miyazaki, never change.
Never change. But I will say that is one of my dislikes because like with the seamless co-op mod being released and the popularity of it, I'm hoping with the next Dark Souls or Souls-like, I mean, that we see that change. They've expressed it too, saying that they see the popularity of the mod and it is something they are actively looking at.
I really
So I'm
hope
hoping
so.
we do see a major change. Yeah.
Yeah. I when I played Elden Ring, I did do a little bit of multiplayer, and I was confused. I'm like, I don't think I fully grasp who is doing what in what world and what you mean in the context of my game. It was fun. It was really cool that it worked at all. Sometimes I'm an old man and get amazed that computers working online at all. But I felt a little bit more complicated than it needed to be.
Yeah, and I will say a little bit does help with like the feeling of the games. Like Elden Ring, I feel like less so, but like Dark Souls, everything like that feeling of being alone. Bloodborne, definitely. where like your help disappears after the boss is beaten and you're alone again, and like just seeing signs from other players or blood signs from other players, knowing they're there but not actively helping you. I feel like that helps out a little bit of like desolation or loneliness they wanted to fill in those games. But Elden Ring, I do not feel like it's a good fit for.
Right. I could see that. It's definitely, at least when you start the game, it's a very pretty and open, and it doesn't have that much of a feeling of desolation like you were saying. So that makes sense.
That's actually a good point, dude. That's one of my big likes with like, that was probably what hooked me into Elden Ring so much too, was that initial opening. Whenever you open that gate and that initial look, and there's been a few Souls like that do things like that. Like Bloodborne's when you first leave the hospital, the chapel hospital, I don't remember what exactly it was, but you see the Victorian age era, you hear the beast roar and everything. Just immediately you're hooked with all that stuff.
Really good.
Elden Ring was when you first open it, you see that like the Erd tree, you see the tree sitting and walking around, a dude calling you Maidenless. It's it is those openings that kind of pull me into the world.
Yeah.
Same thing with like Breath of the Wild. Whenever you first exit the like tomb that Link was in, and then he just stands up on this hill and just sees everything. It's like, hey, you can go there eventually, just not yet.
That is a really good point. That's a really good example, honestly, because I had that same feeling when I was playing Breath of the Wild. Like Tears of the Kingdom, similar too.
Yeah, I completely agree. So we kind of mentioned it offhandedly earlier, but a lot of the FromSoft games do have these, let's say, non-traditional multiplayer components. The one that I'm most familiar with is Elden Ring, in that you can summon your friends to come, and then you can also leave notes about what is and isn't a dog. What do the other games kind of do for these multiplayer aspects?
All the games are really similar. There's different items do different things, like or to say the same things. Like Elden Ring is furrowed fingers. The story behind that Elden Ring, you have to cut off your finger to be summoned by people from further than your world. I guess that's the storytelling of it. For like Dark Souls, I think it's soapstone or soap something. I don't remember exactly what it's called, that leaves messages and allows you to be summoned. Orange soapstone and like white soapstone. White, I think, leaves messages. Orange gets summoned. Bloodborne, I do not remember the item right now. Even though I did play a lot of Bloodborne, I did not play a lot of multiplayer. I think the only time I did play multiplayer was with CJ.
Yeah, that was fun.
And Demon Souls, I have not played nearly enough Demon Souls to know.
That's fair. Bloodborne, that's the, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the only one that's still console exclusive, right?
It is, yes.
Yes.
I own a PS4 specifically for that.
My Bloodborne machine.
I have one game on the PS4, and it's Bloodborne.
Oh, that is fair.
Yeah, that seems like it would definitely limit the multiplayer if it's all. Is it on Xbox or is it a PlayStation exclusive?
It is a PlayStation exclusive. As far as I know, Sony owns the IP to Bloodborne.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, like you'll see, I think they've used Bloodborne in some of their other IPs, like at least alluded to Bloodborne in some of the other IPs. I just don't remember what exactly.
Ghost of Tsushima.
Oh, was it Ghost? Oh, it was. You're right. Yeah. Yeah. Which, that's one thing that Sony has been driving people crazy about, is that they do these allusions to such a beloved game by the fans. And even Miyazaki has expressed interest in doing more with the IP. But he's not at liberty to actually openly say that.
So sad.
Yeah. So right now that IP is stuck in limbo. The most I can hope that happen with it is Blue Point, wonderful studio that redid the Shadow of Colossus and redid Demon Souls. I hope they redo Bloodborne because they made Shadow of Colossus beautiful.
I have not played the Shadow of Colossus remake. Is it PlayStation 5, 4?
It's PS4. I think, I don't know if it got a PS5 release or anything, but it is PS4 for sure. Demon Souls is PS5.
I wish Sony would just open their grip a bit, because they also have Jack and Daxter, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, which a lot of companies, if you look at it in this perspective, a lot of companies that open their grip a little bit have started to sell off. Like if you look at 20th Century Fox, they sold to Disney. Disney's buying up a lot of IPs. How long until Disney owns Sony?
I mean, at least then I could see Jack and Daxter in the MCU, and I'd be happy about that.
You're gonna get Kingdom Hearts in the world of Bloodborne.
I'm so excited for that one.
I want to see what the Keyblades would be. I want a gun Keyblade, okay? Just like what's his name, Leon had.
Please.
Nah, best we're getting is PlayStation All Stars 2, and you can you'll get a map.
Dude, I wouldn't complain. Not even gonna complain. I'd be down for PS All Stars too.
Oh my god, that this is a tangential, but have you guys heard of Bloodborne Kart?
Yes, they had to rename it Nightmare Cart,
Yes.
sadly, but yeah, it is free on Steam, and I have not yet to play it, but I think I got it downloaded.
It looks so funny. I love that.
There's also a game, I don't know where you can download. You can probably get off GitHub now, and everything, but it's Bloodborne demake, and I don't know why demakes like Crow Country. Like I said, I enjoy that game, and demaking games into like older graphics is really cool.
Mhm.
But they redid Bloodborne in like PS1 graphics and gave it tank controls. And as much as I hate tank controls, it was so fun.
That's amazing.
I love this age of retros now, like N64, PS1. So good.
It's all coming back. All the retro stuff, the styles, it's all coming back, man.
Oh man, are we ever gonna be like, man, I love retro games like Breath of the Wild, and well, let's demake let's demake Legend of Zelda Future to the Past 3 into the style of Breath of the Wild.
God.
Where your weapon breaks every like other enemy and
Added weapon durability.
added weapon durability. That was probably my only complaint from Breath of the Wild. Everything was the weapon maintenance systems. I enjoy it though because it also forces you to use more, and that's where I think it excelled. It's right.
Yeah.
But it didn't though, because I was like holding on to this katana for the whole game and I never used it because of the stupid durability system.
You've got to learn to let go, CJ.
Never.
That is a good point too, because like it does force you to do that. Because there was times where I was like, I'm gonna save this weapon for like a certain enemy, and like I would eventually get to that point, like, yeah, you know what, I'll save it a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of games I do that though with like any consumable item. If you give me a consumable item in a game, that thing is just going in storage.
Yep.
I say I'll use it by the end of the game, but it's not getting used.
Check my like 900 Lionel horns in Tears of the Kingdom that are never going to be fused to anything.
For me, it's like Baldur's Gate. All the potions I have, just stockpiles of potions.
Yeah.
Why is this game so hard?
I need healing, but I don't want to use a potion.
Do you guys keep a bag of dyes? That's what I did in Baldur's Gate 3. Every shop I went to, I bought all the dyes and I put them in a bag.
Yes, I
just
did.
have them at any moment. I could dye my clothes whatever color I want.
Yep, I 100% did that. Never dyed any of my clothes.
What? It's like 90% of the game is getting different colored clothing, dude.
Oh,
So back to Souls-like. So I'm kind of seeing a bit of a pattern here in that there are a lot of mechanics that are pretty similar between Fromsoft games, even if they're from a different IP, technically. Bloodborne versus Dark Souls versus Elden Ring. Outside of the online, what would you say are some of the like core defining mechanics of the I don't know. I don't want to say series because that's not quite right. Of their repertoire, whether that be gameplay mechanics or kind of aesthetics.
there's a few that I can think of. So stamina management is one big one, which that comes out in a lot of games I know, but there's been a lot of times in like Bloodborne, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, and all these games where I'm in the middle of a fight, I'm like, I'm out of stamina. And that doesn't happen as much in other games as I feel as whenever I'm dodging and be like, that was the deciding factor of that boss fight, and I'm dead. Was my stamina. Dodge rolls is another big thing. You see that in other games, but they don't do quite what they do in Souls-likes, where they give what are called iframes, which I assume both of you guys know what iframes are.
That would be invincibility frames for those not unawares.
Yep. I think Elden Ring gives you like 28 iframes or something like that on your base roll on a medium build. I don't remember exactly though. I may be lying. Who knows? But that's also a big defining factor is those dodge rolls and those iframes. not specifically the dodge rolls, but being able to dodge and have iframes in some way or manner. Bloodborne has a way. Sekiro, I don't remember if it does give you iframes on its, like, I think it's got like a sidestep move. I think it does give you iframes, but it's very little. It's like Bloodborne.
Okay.
The two biggest defining things, and one's kind of, I've seen Souls-likes not have this, but are boss fights.
Mm-hmm.
Just a big defining boss fights that are almost all roadblocks. I think the big defining part of Souls-likes, and consequences on death. Whichever game has consequences on death, but your consequence on death for Souls-likes is you won't get the level up. You're losing part of your level up.
A good medium weight death, if you will. Our episode last week was on dying, and Souls-like games would be considered a medium weight death because you lose something, unlike a lightweight death, but it's not the end of the game like a heavyweight death. Does that make sense?
Oh, like a permadeath system. I did see your guy. I haven't got to watch it, but I did see that pop up on my feed. I need to watch it.
Oh, that's fine.
Because I do love permadeath modes in games. Like, I know Last of Us has one of them. I think Dead Space has... Dead Space 3, I remember, had like a save system to it where it was like, you get 3 saves in this permadeath mode, and that's it.
I don't know. I don't think I gave this this little tidbit of information last week, but the one time I did try playing an Iron Man mode was XCOM 2, and my save got corrupted. And I had put so many hours, not because I died, I put so many hours and my save just got corrupted, and I never played in Iron Man mode again. I was so pissed, dude.
That's really depressing.
Oh, it was so upsetting.
But yeah, I do feel like I said, the consequences on death, the aspect of like losing your souls, losing your ruins, I don't think that one weighs as heavy into the Souls-like genre, because one of the ones that I was going to talk about, which I think we'll probably still discuss a little bit, but is Remnant 2, or Remnant 1 even. It doesn't have a leveling system at all like that.
Oh.
Yeah, it doesn't have like a souls counter or anything like that. I don't remember what the item is. You find an item to get traits. I don't remember what the item is, but it's not something you lose on death.
Wait, both Remnants don't do that?
Pretty sure.
Oh man, I remember playing Remnant. I don't remember that at all.
It's because something that wasn't ever like, it's not there, so it's hard to remember it not being there. You know what I mean? Because it's something I thought back to. I had to look at the HUD on Remnant and be like, because this was something I was like, before I bring up the podcast, I actually did Google to make sure I'm not completely close, but I looked up the HUD on Remnant and everything to be like, oh yeah, there's no counter for your souls or anything there. And then I was like, one perk trait unlocked. That's right, it's an item you find to unlock a new trait.
Crazy.
Oh, that is really interesting.
But Remnant, as is, it's an entire beast on its own. To me, it's one of the best Souls-likes that isn't derivative in any way.
I did want to ask about the saving bonfire mechanic, because I associate that pretty strongly with Dark Souls, and it seems to be popping up in a lot of other places now.
That's a good point. That's not even what I actually thought about, but that is a really defining part of Souls. Like, I know Liza P has Stargazers. Remnant even has its version, which is, I don't remember, it's a red shard. I don't remember exactly what it was. But almost any Souls like does have that like hub system where that like that's your safe area.
For those at home, you go to like a save point, which is usually like a physical thing in the world. You sit down and you can level up. You save your game, and all the enemies that you've killed, except for bosses, will respawn, which is a huge Souls thing.
Yeah.
I actually didn't know that. I didn't know everything respawned when you went to the bonfire. That explains a lot.
There's like a few things that don't, but most things do. Bosses don't, but could you imagine?
Yeah, bro. Listen, that's an aspect I want them to put in a game so bad, because refighting Mesmer for 6 hours sounds awesome to me.
You're crazy. No, thank you. No, thank you.
But yeah, that is an aspect I did forget, and that's a big Souls-like thing, is the respawning of enemies sitting at Graces. And like, that's kind of where the farming comes into too. You'll see, like, I know Elden Ring's at the farming area for the Mogwin Palace. You'll sit at a Grace, you'll turn around, use the sacred relic sword or whatever, kill a whole bunch of Albinorics, sit back down, respawn them all, get back up, do it again. Oh. It makes for farming for ruins and leveling.
Yeah, I never really thought about grinding in Souls games. Obviously, that's not something you typically do because you play one-hit kill characters. Or do you do it in like max out your attack or something like that?
Whenever you're doing that, usually it's whenever you've hit a roadblock. Whenever I first played Bloodborne, I did do a little bit of that. But Bloodborne also has got its own grinding mechanic, and this is another kind of Souls-specific thing, which is your healing items being finite, but at the same time resetting with the world as well.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah. But Bloodborne, on the other hand, did not have that. Bloodborne, it was a droppable item that was a consumable that was dropped by a lot of common enemies, but you could run out. And the biggest flaw in that system for a Souls-like was that, imagine like you are trying to break down a wall, like we've been saying, with this boss fight. And like the people that have played up to that point in Bloodborne, they never played, like Elden Ring hadn't been out or anything like that. So stepping away from a boss fight wasn't a big thing because you're starting to lose that skill set, losing the memory, losing the timing. So stepping away wasn't big bad at that point. Bloodborne got a lot of criticism for having to fight a boss, running out of that expendable consumable, and then having to step away and go farm it.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. I remember 2 specific bridge trolls that I killed over and over again just to stockpile healing potions in that game. It's the only one like that, and I'm curious why. Is there a lore reason?
See, I don't think there's a lore reason to you just getting your flask refilled in Dark Souls. Like
That's
your Estus
true,
being refilled,
actually.
I don't think there's a real reason to them just coming back.
Huh.
So I feel like there's more of a lore reason for Bloodborne's having to be farmed than there is for Dark Souls just appearing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It was the one thing that irked me about Bloodborne.
It irked me at first too, but I will say at a certain point in the game, there becomes this hump that once you get over it, you're like, oh, I just have like 900 of these blood vials that I will never run out of.
Can't be me. Never
until
been
I
there.
fight. Listen, there was one time that I came close to running out of them, and I was fighting the Bloody Crow at Canehurst. NPC boss fights are my kryptonite, because anything that can dodge roll with iframes like me and Hill sucks.
Fair.
The last thing that I really have noticed in terms of similarities is just kind of the overall vibe. It tends to be, to use a word you mentioned earlier, like desolate and isolated, and more or less so depending on the game. I imagine Sekiro is a little bit different, but in general, it's like you against these massive obstacles, not just massive in terms of like how difficult they are, but typically physically big as well, and usually in a word, really fucked up looking. Was there anything that you'd want to say about as to like the aesthetic through line between all the FromSoft games?
Specifically FromSoft, like you kind of covered, they're a lot more desolate. But like whenever it comes to Souls, like I don't know if that's such a defining thing for them, because if you look at some of the games, a good example is Another Craft Treasure. That game feels like I'm playing Little Mermaid, but in a Souls-like.
Right.
But like I will say, and I think that comes a little bit with like the maturity of the games. A lot of people like to have that more like mature aspect to these harder games. If that makes sense. While like Another Craft Treasure is supposed to be a parody on itself anyway, so it's not too big of a deal.
Okay, so the enemies and bosses in FromSoft games are usually like physically bigger than you, like not to make them scarier, not for lore reasons, probably for lore reasons, but mostly for a design, like it was a design choice because it's easier to read them and like see telegraphed attacks if something's bigger than you, which is why you're always like the smallest thing in the room in a FromSoft game. Usually.
Yeah. It's probably also the reason why your NPC invaders and stuff like that, their attacks feel like they come out quicker because they are the same size as you.
Exactly.
I think
it's also the reason why like dogs and all that stuff are such big enemies in Dark Souls. A lot of people like to attribute them to being one of the more annoying enemies.
I have heard that before, that the smaller the enemy in Dark Souls, the more you need to be afraid.
Yes.
I feel like that's probably one of the biggest contributing factors of a Souls-like, though, is the telegraphed attacks. Because to have a boss fight that feels unfair, or to have a boss fight that is just difficult because of health or difficult because of damage output feels like just it feels like a game. Like it feels like you just upped the difficulty scale on the game. While like Souls likes the telegraph attack and everything, you realize you made a mistake. Like you're like, okay, well that was a mistake. And there's been times too I'll say I played a Souls like even from Soft, I'm like that boss is kind of there's some stuff that I don't like about that boss fight. And that's why I brought up Mesmer a few times. That right now is probably one of my favorite, and probably because it's fresh in my mind. But the DLC release Mesmer, all of its attacks were really well telegraphed. Anytime I got hit, I was like, that was I should have dodged that. I got greedy, or I should have jumped there. I shouldn't have been there. There were all times, and it's like I said, CJ was on stream watching a few of those, and he saw that evolution of being like, oh, that attack hits me every time, to be like, I'm going to learn this attack combo and dodge it every time.
It's almost like fighting games in that you see what you've done and you try to adapt to that for the next time you fight him. And if you could go back and like watch replays of your Elden Ring fights, I think it could add a lot to the game. That would be cool for the next FromSoft game, is to add like replays to boss fights. I don't know if they would or could, but that'd be cool.
I think it'd be enjoyable. I think also just being able to respawn bosses would be enjoyable, because like to me, Souls likes usually have like one or two defining bosses that I really enjoyed fighting. Like every boss is either like there's your F tier bosses, and then there's like your mid bosses, and then there's like one or two in the game that I was like, these were amazing fights.
That's so true. I never thought about that, but you can't really refight bosses unless you restart the game, huh?
Exactly. And one of my favorite bosses fights in base Elden Ring was Horlu. His boss fight felt really well choreographed. The lore mechanics to the fight were also really in tune. And he's also right before the final boss, so if I ever want to refight him, I have to replay the entire game.
Damn.
That is unfortunate.
Part of the reason why I have 700 hours in Elden Ring.
Yeah, I see what you mean about having a replay. I could see that being pretty useful. I for all that I've said about, I don't particularly, this isn't a genre that appeals to me very much. I do get that. I get playing it and being like, no, that was entirely my fault. Like the game was fair. No stupid stick drift. That was just me being an idiot. I should have jumped there. I should have dodged. I got greedy. And I think for me, when I feel like that, there's a certain point where I feel I feel encouraged to keep going and to keep pushing through it, and then there's just like a drop off point, and I'm like, nah, I'm gonna go learn something else. Weirdly, I have a lot more resilience for really difficult platformers, even though I feel like it's the same type of grinding. Like I've been playing The Messenger. There's some pretty tricky sections, and I am very much willing to just like do a tricky platforming section over and over and over again until I get it right. And am doing the same thing where I'm like beating my head against the wall because I know it's my fault that I didn't jump in time. I don't know why I don't feel the same draw when I'm playing Souls-like games.
That's an interesting thing I never thought about, the platformer comparison. Because like I don't have that draw on playing platformers, because there's been there, and I will completely agree. Like it definitely is that grinding and like feeling like you're at a brick wall, because part of it is too with like jumping near ledge, like jumping off ledges and everything on the game. There's a lot of games that implement, I don't remember the system's called or what it is, but technically speaking, there's a few frames. Coyote time, thank you. Yes, and like I'm so bad at that because like, and maybe that's part of the reason why I like Souls like everything. Whenever I dodge roll, I have iframes, so like it's on time with my dodge. But with Coyote time, technically speaking, I don't need to be on time. I need to be a little bit late, and I want to jump right at the edge.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't know why.
Like there's some good platforms out there right now, like Chained Together. Like there's a lot of co-op platforms. That's a big genre right now. It's Chained Together. There's a penguin one that looks really cool. I do not remember the name of it right now.
Oh, I don't think I've heard of that one.
Two penguins scaling a mountain.
That sounds cool.
They're chained.
Where you're like
together. Penguin.
Yeah.
What is it called?
I know which one you're talking
about. Oh wait, yeah,
I
do. Shoot, what is that?
I don't remember the name of it right now, but that's a big one I've been seeing a lot of streamers play. But like A big difficult one too would be, what is it? Started re-up the platforming genre for a more difficult basis, and it was you're in a pot, you got a hammer. I do not remember the name
Oh,
of it.
Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy.
Yes, and I feel like that really
Mm.
re-upped the platforming genre for more of a difficult aspect.
Yeah, I feel like I could see myself playing that more. I don't know what it is, because in platformer games, the worst part for me is the boss battles. I get really frustrated, and if I'm gonna quit, it's gonna be there. I.e., Shovel Knight. Love that game to death. Will grind through some pretty difficult sections, but I get to the boss battle, and I just get really frustrated, and that's usually about the point that I will stop a playthrough. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and I feel like it's very well telegraphed, and I don't feel that they're unfair in any way. But my resilience, I don't feel like I have a lot of resilience for those.
I wonder why that, because there's something interesting too, that in Souls like there's what's called the boss run,
Hmm.
which is the run up to the boss.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what a platform would be, is that run up to the boss beforehand. So you like that segment before the boss fight. I'm curious if that's just a if you played a Souls, like if you prefer the boss runs rather than actually fighting the boss as well, if that
Hmm.
translates.
I do like running around in Elden Ring. I think
Mhm.
one of the first areas I did was like this big castle, fairly close to the starting area, and you wander around the castle, you find items, you fight enemies, and then eventually there's like a wolf guy in a some kind of a water shallow body of water. I enjoyed the most that I played of the game was the run up to that boss, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But then when I got to that boss, I played it for a really long time and then gave up.
Though from what I've heard with like your experience of games too, you're more focused on the exploration of games. Like your Breath of the Wild's a big game for you,
Hmm.
and like Elden Ring is new to the exploration.
Hmm.
So I will say like it's a new aspect, and it makes sense that you like that part. But maybe that's part of the reason why you don't like Souls, like because you're locked in place for so long.
That is a good
Mm.
point. That is a good point. I do feel that way in in Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, when I end up in an area where I'm just kind of, well, like the Divine Beast, I don't care for them as much because I feel like I'm just locked in this tight area for a pretty long time. Uh, and you're exploring, but you're exploring such a confined area. On the other side of that coin, the dungeons in Tears of the Kingdom were so much more open, and I feel like they had a lot more room for exploration. They didn't feel like as much of a slog for me.
Hmm.
Learning about myself.
That's fair. What were your thoughts on like the old like dungeons in old Zelda games?
Hmm. I see. I actually didn't play a ton of old Zelda games. Uh,
Okay.
the only one I had as a kid was Link's Awakening DX, and I was too
Mm.
stupid to play it. I just I could never get out of the overworld. Uh,
That's fair.
I actually played through the remake of Link's Awakening in the run up to Tears of the
Mm.
Kingdom, and I did really enjoy it, but I did not like the dungeons as much as I like being in the overworld.
See, because I did like the dungeons in the old Zelda games, but I'm with you on the divine beasts. I didn't care for those for some
Hmm.
reason. I don't know.
I am curious to see, like, so part of the Souls genre and everything too is like locking part of the exploration behind having to get past those boss fights, where the games you guys are describing are more like this is a side thing, go into the dungeon, kill the boss, come back out, explore the overworld.
Hmm.
Like it doesn't lock you
Yeah.
out of exploration.
Right. I'm like
Hmm.
exploring, mostly to explore, but kind of with the idea of beating the boss in the back of my head. Whereas I think the other way is fighting the boss for the goal of exploring.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's the way the game rewards you.
Hmm.
And this is actually an interesting topic to go into, is like roguelikes do that a little bit differently as well. Like the way they reward you. One good comparison I saw was like Risk of Rain and like Binding of Isaac and everything. Those roguelikes are more of like a gambling roguelike where like sometimes your run is doomed from the
Hmm.
start because of the rolls you got. While like some games like Hades, there's a skill gap in there where it's like you get instant rewards for being good at the game. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
instant, like get this part of the dungeon done in a certain amount of time. There's a lot of those rewards. And Binding Isaac's appeal, like I said, Binding Isaac's appeal is that gambling concept. Like I got a really good roll, that dopamine rush. Like I just hit good on a slot machine. While Hades is like that. A lot of people would describe it as like ADHD reward systems, where like you get a cookie. Now do this next thing. Okay, you get a cookie again. Like I'm a child getting snacks.
That's fair.
The two types of roguelike games. Do you want a cookie or are you a gambling addict? I'm a gambling addict, apparently, because I love Risk of Rain.
I do too, but I play it on command.
Oh, I see.
So my reward is never gambling. And like I played it on the hardest difficulty because I do feel like command is overpowered.
Mhm.
That artifact is 100% crazy. But I play it on monsoon that way. I play it for an absorbent amount of time. Usually after I play a session for like 2 hours in one run, because I want the difficulty to be way scaled.
Right. Oh, that's cool. I never thought about playing it like that. I tend to play on glass, which basically gives you like, I think it's 10% of your normal HP, but you do 500% damage. And I feel like that's even more reliant on having good items, like optimized for more gambling.
See, and that's really why I like Risk of Rain, because it bridges that gap where it can be that different reward system. And like I said, we're talking about like how we prefer exploration. Where is the exploration a reward for the boss fight, or is it you're exploring to find the boss fight? Is the reward the boss fight?
Right. Oh.
So maybe it's a different reward system. Part of the reason why you don't necessarily enjoy like Elden Ring or like Souls, like just in general.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So we kind of alluded. Well, I feel like I made this transition earlier. We're going to talk about the games that are Souls likes but aren't Dark Souls games, or FromSoft in any way. The one that I have the most recent experience with is Another Crab's Treasure. I picked that up last week and played up until the first boss, and it was a lot of fun. I do feel like I had more fun because I had somebody there with me. CJ was with me while I was playing. But yeah,
and you did beat the first boss.
I did. I did beat the first boss. It wasn't too bad. It was very well designed in that it kind of teaches you how to use the shield mechanic of the game, and gives you a lot of shells, aka shields, to play with. I suspect that that's not going to be the case for every fight.
A decent amount of the fights in that game do give you like some shells in the arena, and that's one that I really did enjoy about Another Crab's Treasure, where they did a different take where like your armor is depleting, but you also have armor in the arena, so you're actively not just fighting the boss, you're also actively trying to recoup your armor.
Yeah, it was really cool to like. I was fighting the boss, but I was also trying to like manipulate him into going into certain areas so I could get those shells. That's a cool thing that I haven't seen in a lot of games where you have to kind of play with the AI like that.
Yeah, a lot of time I see stuff like that is like, it's a very standard one, but I can't think of a game that does it. I think Sekiro may have done something like that. But like a good concept is like the Raging Bull running into the wall concept. You see in a lot of games where like the bull runs in, they get staggered for a second, and they get a second to actually breathe.
That's a good point.
Classic trope.
I feel like that's a big Mario thing.
Yeah, I can see that.
CJ, when we were playing, you pointed out several things about Another Crab's Treasure that were similar to Dark Souls that I definitely wouldn't have caught.
Yeah. One of the coolest things, and I'm pretty sure this is a FromSoft thing, is you can always see your next destination in the distance. Like when you first start Another Crab's Treasure and you come out of the tide pool or whatever, you can see the castle that you're supposed to go to off in the distance. That's always sort of been like a Souls-like thing, or at least in Dark Souls 3, the one I played the most of. You kind of always have an idea of where you're going next because it's just this giant structure off in the distance, usually.
Yeah. Another thing Another Crab's Treasure did a little bit too was I think it did. Yeah, a little bit like shortcut system, and you see that a lot of Souls likes, and this is another thing kind of defines
That's
the
true.
genre,
Yeah.
is like how the map interconnects with itself. Elden Ring didn't do this as much, except for in its like legacy dungeons. Like we were talking about the castle, that
Mm-hmm.
Stormvale. There are some shortcut areas in there where you can get to different places, or you can get to the same place, and that's what it usually devolves into, is you getting back to your same side of grace. Another Crab Treasure does that with some of its like legacy S dungeons as
Mm.
well, where like you can find this thing that like it's a shortcut, but you have to activate it. Once you activate it from the other side, you're now in this complete different area, but you can go back to where you were quicker.
Oh, I
Hmm.
see. I see. That's pretty cool.
Because like Souls like besides Elden Ring didn't have a fast travel mechanic besides whenever you were at a grace or a hub area.
Another really small thing that another Crab's Treasure did is it just made items these little glowing orbs of light, like in every Fromsoft game ever.
That is one thing too, and like another Crab Treasure also kind of did that, where it's like, here's a glowing orb of light, but there's also an enemy over there too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that's a big Souls trope. Is like there's an enemy around this corner. I think
Mm.
another Crab Treasure you guys can get to this point, but there is a swamp, a poisonous swamp.
Of course, of course.
The number one trope for your standard Souls
Thanks,
like game.
Miyazaki.
Another Crab's Treasure to me is a really good example of what a parody is,
Mm-hmm.
because it stayed so true to the source material to the point where it kept parry mechanics, changed them up a bit. I think the parry mechanic in that game, the way it worked is you were in your shell and then you release it on the point of contact.
Oh,
Where parries in like Elden Ring it's a shield, and you have to. It's a little bit early. You have to hit it early before the swing comes down, but the shield and the hitbox have to make eye contact. They have to make contact before the parry goes off. Sekiro, it's a time thing. It's right on the hit that you time those. So like I said, it put the parry system in. It had a leveling tree where basically you could kind of choose what Souls like you were playing almost, because I think the parry was locked behind the leveling.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And that was a really interesting mechanic to me, is that like the way certain Souls likes played, you could kind of choose it with that tree.
That is really cool. And you said that was in Elden Ring?
This was another Crab Treasure.
Oh, cool. That is really
Yeah.
cool.
Like I said, the parry mechanic was locked there. I don't remember there was a deflect mechanic, but there was stuff to like regenerate your shield or your shell, all in this one little hub area. The magic system was in that if you wanted to use it. So if you don't want to use magic, it wasn't there. Another interesting thing from another Crab Treasure that I don't see from Souls like generally is that you don't change your weapons. You have a fork, and that is it.
Yeah, I was really surprised to hear that.
it's kind of Sekiro-esque.
That's a good point. That is Sekiro-esque. I didn't think about that actually.
Mm.
Yeah, I was surprised by it too. There is an upgrade system for the fork,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
it doesn't fundamentally change the fork. It just increases damage.
Mm.
And there is an ability to change your fork into a hammer, which I really loved. It was it was a thrusting attack, so you could attack with the thrusting attack, or you could hit a shell that was soft enough
Mm.
to put that on the end of your fork and make it a hammer.
Oh my god, I love that.
That's neat.
I believe there is one other weapon in another Crab's Treasure, though. The gun.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's also another thing too, is like the assist mode. I do think that's something you don't ever see in
Mhm.
Souls like, is that assist mode where like you can change the
Mm.
difficulty. I feel like another Crab Treasure does do it really well, where it's not just a single slider,
Mhm.
where it's like you can
Mhm.
adjust this, you can turn this on and off, you can adjust how much iframes you're actually getting. Like they had a whole bunch of small scales.
Yeah.
Aggro Crab's accessibility settings are top tier. They were
Yep.
really good.
And the gun was top tier.
The gun is so funny. What I liked about it is when you go into those settings, the first thing you see is like, this game is meant to be hard. Like the way that we want you to play this game is by not touching these settings.
Mhm.
But here they are. Like here they are anyway. You know, play it however you want. You paid $60 or $40 for this game. Play it however you want, but we have a preferred way, and this is it.
I do 100% like the accessibility. I'm not game for it on every game.
Mhm.
Whenever it comes to difficulty being a slider, I do like the concept of it being kind of dictated by how the game developer wants it to be. Just because, like I said, if Elden Ring or Bloodborne or Dark Souls or anything had a slider, whenever I say, "Oh, I beat this boss level 1," and this other person says, "Oh, I beat this boss level 1," doesn't mean the same.
Right. Right. And I feel that ultimately, I don't know if the games would be as popular as they are if they had a difficulty slider. I mean, what would be, they're cool, they're iconic, but what I know the series for before I had played it is that it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the number one thing I knew it for, because whenever I first touched any Souls game was Dark Souls 1, and I had a friend, it was 360. I had a friend directing me through the entire game because I would have got lost in that hub, because you start just at it's pretty generic where you start first, and then you end up in this little hub area, and there's a castle off, and this is where kind of CD was talking about, where like you have the castle off in the distance, you're supposed to go towards. I'm dumb, I didn't go that way first. I went through the cave, then my friend told me to turn around.
I do think that Dark Souls, there's a lot of games where, you see the obvious path, but if you go the other way, it's like, oh, you'll find a little pile of coins, or you're gonna, maybe find a cool cape or something. Dark Souls is like, no, you go the way we say, or we're gonna kill you really hard.
I'm about to say, you find death on that other path if you go.
Accurate.
That was my first experience with it. I remember going to the castle. I remember my friend telling me also, be like, hey, get bows, get arrows real quick. I was like, I've always heard Souls games, those suck. And he's like, yeah, they do, but grab them anyways. Okay, whatever. And we got to a bridge, a dragon flew across it, and he's like, shoot this dragon in the tail like 90 times with a bow and arrow. I was like, what? And I did, and it gave me a sword. It gave me his tail fell off, and he dropped what was called the Drake sword. And it's a really good beginner. It's a weapon that doesn't scale. So in other words, it doesn't get better as you upgrade it or you upgrade yourself, but it's great at the beginning of the game, which I think was a great way to do accessibility in Dark Souls, was to add those things that, like, here's a way for you to, as a beginner, learn the game, but it's not going to scale with you. It's not going to get better than what it already is. It's good for the beginning, but not late game.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that as a way to help people ramp on, but it's not really explicit. And I mean, you'd either need to be very creative or explorative to find it, or you're finding a friend, which I think, in my experience, I've had the most fun when I play with a friend for a Souls-like game.
Yeah, and I will say too, like, finding that sword, I don't think it was something that was meant for accessibility, but it was my accessibility. That was how I first got into the game. That's what allowed me to kill the tourist demon in that game, kill the gargoyles with relative ease, and be like, okay, I can do this. I'm figuring out how the iframes work. I'm figuring out how the game works. I do think that FromSoft starting to implement more stuff like that would be nice. Elden Ring, I think I did their accessibility better, where it allows you to step away. And I feel like that opened up the genre a lot as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So I think not necessarily messing with the difficulty is the biggest thing they needed to do it. I think it's just messing with, like, what the menu is called accessibility, where it's like, here are some like handicap scale on, I think Mario Kart used to have a handicap scale where you could scale let down the NPCs, and like I feel like that is like a temporary thing.
Right.
I feel like Elden Ring kind of did something like that with its, where you could summon not just NPCs, but you could, like, summon monsters to help you.
Oh yeah, the ashes. Yeah,
the ashes. Yeah, you get that, and I don't know. There's a lot of small things that I see higher level players just like, I'm not going to do that because it makes the game too easy, and like, I want to play the hard mode, but at the same time, you're giving me this, and I'm gonna use it. If this was an option to select at the beginning, I would have said no. But because I always have the option to do it, I'm almost always gonna summon my little goblin army.
See, and I watch this one guy play, and like he does stuff exactly opposite. Like you said, give him the option. I remember watching him play a challenge run where he was constantly taking poison damage consistently in Dark Souls 1. And he actually did a glitch just to skip grabbing the Estus Flask so he wouldn't have it at his disposal.
Why? Insanity. Could not catch me playing a Dark Souls game without my bottle of Appy Juice.
Another good example of, okay, so where I'll go into a good game, bad example of what is inspired but feels derivative, and now we'll go into what I already talked about this other game a little bit, but what
Perfect.
is inspired and doesn't feel derivative, feels like its own, stands
Hmm.
on its own. But the first one is Liza P. I don't know if you guys did check that game out at all. Like I said, if you're not a big FromSoft player, so it's like I would not suggest picking it up. It is very much a FromSoft-esque game to the point it feels like it's made by FromSoft.
Hmm.
It's a really
Yeah.
well-made game. The setting, it's set in like a steampunk Victorian, like steampunk um, industrial age era of like England, and you play Pinocchio.
Nice. I've I've definitely heard of it. I'm still like shocked to hear that it's Pinocchio.
Every time it shocks me, dude. I played the demo and I beat the boss for the demo and I had a lot of fun and like, oh man, I really want to play this game when it comes out. And I never did.
I've spent about 80 hours in it. I've also started a RL1 run in it as well, and I think I'm like 5 or 6 bosses in, and I'm locked up. And this one is actually one that doesn't have a multiplayer, so I'm actually having to do something myself, which is fun. But either way, Liza P. It's you play Pinocchio in a industrial age where Geppetto and a few other industrialists have made puppets that like do household chores and stuff like that. The puppets go rampant, and you are a puppet as well that looks like Geppetto's kid that has to figure out why.
That's pretty cool. I like that as a premise.
And there's a whole bunch of lore aspects in the game. You start to figure out that like you had a friend that also your human or your like I'm trying to think of find this, but like your name's Carlos. If you weren't Pinocchio, in other words, like if you were Geppetto's kid still, like truly his kid, not a puppet, his name is Carlos, and he had a friend that you eventually meet, and he's a boss fight called Romeo. There's a whole bunch of story premises there, and it all leads up into like fighting this one dude that's trying to collect all the energy or what's called ergo in the world. Yeah, but they're really interesting story wise. Anyway, the game plays very similar to the best example of it would be Bloodborne mixed with Sekiro.
Okay.
It doesn't have a traditional dodge roll. It's got a sidestep. And you can dodge roll if you're not locked on, but the sidestep if you are
Okay.
on. And I lock on no matter what. I think most people do as well. But the game leans more towards what's called, it calls it its perfect blocks, but it's like Sekiro's deflex. Hit the guard button as soon as a hit comes down, it's perfect blocked. That's what makes it fun for like a RL1 run, because if you can only take one hit or 2 hits, it feels like I said, it's Sekiro system where it feels nice. You get that like ting sound. It's got that similar thing. It's a dopamines get released. But anyway, it plays like that. The boss fights, there were, I want to say probably 4 or 5 that were memorable to me. I even like spent probably 3 or 4 hours fighting one of them. There's no accessibility settings, I will say, on that. It's difficulty, and that's it. They have released updates that have lower difficulties, but that's just patches. It's like, here's more iframes for you. They realized they got some backlash on, I guess this is technically an accessibility now I think about it. But the tree system they got, similar to how Another Crap's Treasure has the parry lockdown, the tree system, they had something similar where I think it was called dodge linking, where you could dodge and then dodge as well.
Okay. I see.
And it was locked in the tree, and they got backlash from that, being like, this feels like it should just be basic. Like, this should just be something you have.
I see. And so that was something they added later on as a base skill.
Yeah, exactly. It's got your the ergo, the energy in the game. That's your souls.
Okay.
It's got stargazers, which are your bonfires. It's got both visual setting lore dumps and item description lore dumps. A lot of your, like, early on in the game, and even in the demo, I think I streamed the demo a little bit actually. In the demo, there was a portion where you see a guy in like green, like he looks kind of like Groot, if Groot was like,
okay.
It's so weird. It's so fun, but he looks like Groot if like Groot was slaughtered.
Oh God. Okay.
Huh.
There was a half second where I heard Gru, as in from Despicable
Me
Me.
too.
I'm like, oh,
Oh
I mean,
gosh.
long nose checks out.
um, but there's a segment of that, and it's definitely a organic thing, which is weird in this world because like it's all puppets and it's all mechanical, it's all this. So it shows you that, and then eventually you figure out that like, oh, Ergo can corrupt people. It turns people into these like zombie-esque
Mhm.
things.
Hmm.
Yeah. And it does storytelling like that. It does storytelling a lot through like your item descriptions. There's a lot of notes left that tell you a story. And there's a lot of hints towards what the end game is through the item descriptions.
Hmm.
Then a lot of the stuff you figure out about like Carlos and Romeo, their friendship whenever they're children, is through item descriptions, especially through the Romeo boss fight. With all that being said, this game feels like it's FromSoft.
Very
And
much feels like a FromSoft game.
yeah, so much so that I feel like it is derivative.
Hmm.
I love
I
this game.
see.
This game is immaculately made. I love the setting. But like, it feels, if you would not have told me who published this game, I would have thought it was FromSoft. And
Yeah.
that's not necessarily a good thing because it didn't make its own grounding. It didn't make its own footing.
Right. Right. It didn't do enough new to really say it was like adding anything to the genre necessarily. It's just kind of
Yeah,
Mhm.
no.
not a reskin, but almost a reskin.
Almost a reskin, to be honest.
Yeah,
Like down to the animations, dude.
mm-hmm. And like, I don't know if it, like I said, it's hard for me to say that it's a bad thing because I really do love this game. It's such a, and it's partly because the setting's really cool. I've always liked there was a game that released a long time ago. It was like Alice and Madness or
Mhm.
something like that. I love that like fairy tale setting with a twist.
Right.
Hmm.
And that's what this game did. And it scratched that itch. It scratched the concept of like Bloodborne where you got that almost cosmic stuff to it. It didn't quite have like the cosmic horrors exactly to it, but it had the monstrous
Mhm.
stuff to it.
Hmm.
And it scratched all these itches, but at the same time, it was a reskinned version of all these games.
Right.
Well reskinned, well developed. And it brings in the subject of like, are these other games that don't look good or don't have the full development team this game had, would they have been successful as being FromSoft esque if they had the money to?
Right. Right. Because it didn't do anything new necessarily, but it had the graphics, it had the budget to look good, and that was enough. Can you think of another example of something where you thought it was really good, but it didn't get as popular because of the graphics, or some other like it just wasn't to the scale?
There's a few games that like are kind of have interesting concepts. There's a new one coming out that a lot of people have been talking about that I'm not huge on just because it doesn't feel good. I don't know how to pronounce this, so I'm gonna try. But Inotria, the last song.
That rings a bell.
It's a Italian. Yeah, it's like an Italian Souls-like. It's really interesting. Got a really cool setting, but the one thing that Liza P pulled off that I will say is that's a FromSoft like I said staple. It just feels good. Is the controls? They feel smooth.
Mhm.
That's one thing that hangs me up in FromSoft games or like Souls-like games is if the controls feel clunky, like going back and playing Demon Souls or going back and playing Dark Souls and doing I don't remember what the exact name of it is, but whenever you can roll only in 4 directions rather than having omnidirectional rolling, that's what it's called. And it feels clunky. That's what this game was, but it has the setting to be a Souls-like. It has that storytelling aspect. It has all the bases to be a Souls-like, but feels clunky.
I see. I see.
I want to bring up Mortal Shell. I played this
That's my
one
one too.
forever ago, and I just couldn't get into it. It felt derivative again, even though they tried to do something different with the whole shell aspect of it.
Yeah, it's been a while since I played Mortal Shell, and like so, to give you a brief description of Mortal Shell, because if you've already played it, Sam, have you played it?
No, I've not.
Okay, so Mortal Shell, basically the change it did was you had what were called shells, and they basically were different play styles. You could switch between these play styles.
Yeah.
It's basically like doing different builds, but they were preset,
Okay.
and you could switch them.
That sounds pretty interesting.
it was an interesting twist. I've seen other Souls like try to take that on too, but it's one of those games. It felt clunky
Mm.
to me. It didn't feel smooth. It didn't feel fluid. And whenever I'm playing a game where like you can switch stuff up like that, I don't think Souls genres fit well in that switch it up aspect because you're trying to memorize and do certain things rather than changing up your strategies. And like one thing whenever I see this too, like any game I think about where you can change up your fighting styles and everything, I think of fast pace. I'm like, okay. I honestly a weird example is Mortal Kombat. I think there's a character. I think it was Ermac actually. You could switch to flying and non-flying modes and everything, and you can change up combos mid-combo. And it's a fluid change. Where like Mortal Shell just didn't have that fluidity to it.
I could see that. It feels like to play or even to be good at a Souls-like game, you kind of have to develop a muscle memory for your base set of moves. And if you're changing that out constantly, you're not going to build up those reflexes that you need. I'm also just kind of looking visually at this game. It looks very similar to Dark Souls, even down to like the UI has like the big red bar across the top and then the smaller bar at the bottom. I mean, I would completely believe that some of these screenshots were taken from a Dark Souls game as a novice who isn't as familiar with the series.
Another good example of like a what would have been a good Souls like if they would have got a or aspect. I think honestly, what makes a good Souls like is getting aspects of the genre down to a T. Like the boss fights. This is a good example of it. Lords of the Fallen. The boss fights just did not feel right to me. Like there was a boss fight where I don't remember the name of the boss, but her second phase, she would fly towards you in streams. Like it was 3 lanes essentially. You're on a bridge. She would choose one of 3 lanes to fly, and then she would choose the other 2 on the last attack. But every time you transitioned to her second phase, it was always the same outcome. It was always the same lane she chose. Even if you were standing mid-section, she always did the outer 2 first, and then did mid-section. So you just stand there, not doing anything for the first bit of her first or second phase, and it felt rather than feeling like it was actively being in the world, it felt like a game. It felt sounds weird saying felt like a game, but felt more
right.
It felt path.
Right. That makes sense. It's too simple, and it's not reactive enough to what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's one thing too you'll see from Souls like 2 is where enemies do have that reactivity to them. Where like sometimes they'll hit an Estus flask and they actually have input reading, so they'll input read that you're hitting it. So they'll throw something at you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's evil, but it's
I
cool.
think you mean evil, yeah.
It makes it where, so the way a Souls game is, it's weird to say this too, but it's supposed to be played is you're supposed to heal at the same time you would have took an attack. So you dodge, hit. But if you're low on health, you dodge. Take a drink of your like Estus.
I'm firmly in the camp that Souls-like games are just rhythm games with more steps.
They are. There was an entire essay, I don't know if you guys have watched it, about the Boreal Valis dancer, about how she's off key, and that's really why she's such a difficult boss fight for a lot of people. And it's such a good video essay.
I think I've seen that in my recommendations before.
I remember her being one of the roadblocks for me playing Dark Souls 3.
And sometimes I listen to certain songs to beat boss fights. I've also thought about doing it on my stream because it's something I'm kind of going into like testing what helps people get through Souls likes, and I've thought about running metronomes while people do Souls likes to see if that helps a newer person.
I think that would just tick me off.
Gonna be progressively get madder.
Yes, I'm just like, stop that stupid clicking.
Every time you
die,
it goes up by like half a pitch, and so by the end, it's just...
Oh no!
Oh, that's so amazing.
Evil. Before we get too far away from Mortal Shell, I wanted to ask what you thought about the whole shell mechanic. So, like in Mortal Shell, I remember not liking this. I remember it being one of the big selling points, though, was that at any time you're doing an attack, you're standing there, you could block, or no. If you're just standing there, you could block, but anytime no matter what you're doing, you could press the shell button and you would turn into stone, and it like negates all damage, but it's like for a very short moment. And if you're like mid attack and you do it, you can just continue your combo. I remember not liking that.
Yeah, I wasn't huge on it either.
Well, that
Like,
answers that.
How
yeah, about to. I wish I could go more into it, but like Mortal Shell was just it left a sour taste in my mouth
Yeah.
overall game.
No,
I didn't
for
get
real.
put a lot of playtime into it. It was definitely a game I did not beat.
Mhm.
And like it was a cool concept. I think it would have been better if it was something you just actively couldn't like. It was locked behind something more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if it was an ability that you could get and not have to use, but like it was like I think the whole selling point of Mortal Shell, because the main character on the front page is like the stone guy, I think.
Yes.
I just remember that being the selling point and me immediately being like, I really don't want to do this for the whole game.
How similar is
It,
it to the shell mechanic in Another Crab's Treasure?
I don't know, completely
Okay.
different.
Oh, yeah,
I love the shell mechanic in Another Crab's Treasure.
So I feel like that's this is a good kind of leeway too on this. Like Mortal Shell, it tried to force that upon you, while
Mhm.
like it's where it is Another Crab's Treasure. Like the shell isn't forced. Like the shell is a mechanic. You can use it as armor, and you pick up another one, or you can actually parry with it. Like there's a few mechanics that go into the shell
Mhm.
from Another Crab's Treasure.
And it's like it still feels like it has weight. Like you press the shell button, he like hides in it, and then you have to come out of it to do anything else. Where, if I remember correctly, the Mortal Shell thing was like you press L2, and the second you press it, your character turns to stone, and you can't take damage for, I don't know, like 2 or 3 frames or something. And
Yeah.
then you continue whatever animation you were in before. So you like it. It's almost like an antithesis to the rhythm game thing that I said earlier, where like
Yeah,
you
'cause you're
have
just
to
not-
press a button in between beats, and it's terrible.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
For me, anyway. For anyone that liked Mortal Shell, good on you.
I'll give it a try eventually again. I will say, but it was a game that it felt slow, it felt clunky, and like a lot of the stuff they tried to do with the genre. I do enjoy that they tried to do something different. I will never
Oh, yeah.
shame the game for not trying to be its own entity. Like I said, Liza P. It did not try that. As much as I love the game, it did not, and Mortal
very
Shell
safe.
did.
That's very fair. Speaking of things that try something pretty different, there are a couple of 2D games that would technically be considered Souls-like, and I'm wondering if you have any experience with these. One is Blasphemous.
See, I have not. These are games that are on my radar, but also I am bad at platformers. And like they bridge like the Metroidvania and Souls-like esque genre, and boss fights and platformers I'm bad at too. Like the dodging in them. I don't know how Souls-like platformers work, but I don't know if they give you iframes. But I feel like if they did, it'd be very few. So the dodge windows are tighter, and a lot of platformers you're not expected to dodge. You're expected to like duck and weave in between shots.
It's been a minute since I played Blasphemous, and I just played the demo, which, to be fair, is very generous. You get a lot of content in the free demo for that game. But I do think it was just kind of like you have a dodge roll that basically will let you avoid attack. I don't think it's as detailed as it would be for a Dark Souls game, just because it's 2D, and I think you're just a little bit more limited in what you can do. You have basically two directions as opposed to either four or an infinite number of directions. So I think the dodge rolls tend to be a little bit more generous in that game. But the aesthetics are very similar, and I don't know. From the little I played of both, it felt pretty similar to a Dark Souls game.
Yes, it very much evokes the feeling of a Dark Souls game. It a lot of the enemies, man, looks like they could be FromSoft enemies.
See, like I don't know. So is the dodge roll does it gives you iframes, but are you more leaning towards dodge rolling, or are you more leaning towards like, oh, I gotta jump this attack real quick, I have to weave in between these little bullets going across the screen? Like, what is it more leaning towards?
I think that's like part of the challenge is when you learn a boss, you're like, okay, these I can't dodge, these I gotta jump. This attack I can't jump, I have to dodge towards him, not away from him. I think that's part of the challenge is learning what you have to do when you got to do it. It's
Okay,
not all dodge rolling, I believe.
that's thing that was one of my hardest learning curves, I will say, going into Souls likes and everything, is that you get iframes for rolling, but they don't block everything. Or like there's what's called catch rolling, which is like you roll away and they catch you on the end of the hitbox. And like I feel like that's part of the reason why I've never stepped towards a platforming based Souls like, is because I'm gonna get hung up on a lot of those small details. And also, I'm not great at platforming. The one that I've looked at the most, just because I really like Bloodborne and everything, was Last Faith. That one's been on my wish list for a while. I need to pick it up.
I actually haven't heard of this one. Last Faith?
Yes.
I haven't either.
Oh, this looks really cool.
It honestly reminds me very Castlevania-esque. Like Castlevania and Bloodborne had a baby, and it looks so awesome.
It does, yeah. I like it. I hadn't heard about this.
Is this one also a Metroidvania?
Yes.
That's really interesting. So of the three now Souls-like 2D games that I know of, they're all Metroidvanias, which would be Blasphemous, now The Last Faith, and then Hollow Knight. That's a really interesting that's the case when exploration isn't a huge staple of the Dark Souls series.
I do like to see too, though, the change of pace, like mixing genres like that. And like, I'm not a big Metroidvania fan. I'm really not. But I would like to see the Souls-like genre take its precedent in other genre. Like, I don't know how it'd be done, but like a deck building fucking Souls-like would be awesome. But
Yeah, I agree. That could be really cool.
Huh.
I don't know how it'd be done. But
I'm
just
surprised
seeing,
that's not a thing.
it may be, honestly, for all I know.
Huh. Did you just will it into existence?
Hopefully I did. Listen,
I hope you did.
the first time I see it, I will pre-order.
There's a game called Deck of Souls on Steam.
Deck of Souls.
I think it's just a. It looks. Oh shoot! I'm very stupid today. It looks like a Slay the Spire clone.
There's an entire bundle on Steam called Metroidvania / Souls-like. It's a genre that goes well together. A lot of the Metroidvania Souls-likes I see, though, they don't implement like the dodge rolling mechanic, and with it being more of a rhythm game, to me, Souls-like are more of a rhythm game, like CJ was saying. The Metroidvania part of it makes it feel more like a placement. My placement on the screen, and that's one reason I'm bad at fighter games. I get hooked in corners a lot.
Right.
And that's also part of the reason why I'm bad at platformers. In the boss arena, I'm in corners where I shouldn't be.
A really good one, Dead Cells. It's a Metroidvania, but it's also a roguelike, because when you die, it's roguelite. When you die, you start over, but you unlock some stuff in between runs. But it has a dodge roll mechanic that works just like a Dark Souls. You dodge, you get some iframes, you go through enemies. It's really nice. It is by far my favorite Metroidvania game ever.
Dead Cells one's game that I've been needing to pick up.
Yeah,
too.
same. Go ahead.
I was just saying the roguelite and the roguelike genre. There's so many games are a roguelite and a roguelike. It's so hard to like. I don't know why. It's one of those things that dumbfounds me to find the difference sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I know roguelites are generated usually, like they are generated courses, where roguelites are like CJ was saying, like restart. There's so many that bridge that gap.
Yeah, it's very rare to find like a true roguelike that has no progression whatsoever outside of like, what you do in a single run. I don't know if I could say this definitively, but Shovel Knight might be a Souls-like. It doesn't have all the mechanics. It doesn't have a dodge roll. However, it does have the same save system, more or less, where when you die, you don't lose your souls, but you lose your money, and then you have to go back and get it.
Hmm.
And then it does have challenging boss fights at the end of each level. I don't know if I'd call it a Souls like, maybe a Souls light to dilute the waters.
What is a Souls like?
That is a hard question to answer too, because there's every game that I see define themselves as a Souls-like on Steam. Like, what is it? So Remnant 2, we talked about it not having the currency system.
Hmm.
There's a lot that just leave out systems. Like you were saying, Shovel Knight leaves out part of the systems. And it honestly, with what you're saying though, with it leaving, because the currency system is one of the bigger factors for a Souls-like for me. Which is why Remnant 2, it feels like a weird Souls-like to me. But like with it having that, it might honestly be able to be defined as a Souls-like.
Right. Right. It's very interesting. And we kind of talked about roguelikes and roguelites and all of these games that, all of these genres that have kind of started off as an individual game, which kind of like brings up the question, what does it actually mean when a game or a series becomes its own genre? Like, which parts of that get carried forward and which parts of it, what does it mean? Like if they came out with, I'm just going to throw an example. Like if Sekiro didn't have the same save system as Dark Souls, but everything else was the same, would it still be a Souls-like game? What aspects of it are defining enough to make it a staple? Yeah.
So like, okay, so Sekiro is actually an interesting way to throw in there too, because if Sekiro, some people actually don't consider it a Souls-like because it lacks a few of the things that Dark Souls and Elden Ring and Bloodborne and all that have. But I do, even though it doesn't get the currency system. It has just an innate character for one, but it has that difficulty curve. It has dodging. It has a lot of the staples that I enjoyed from Souls-likes and what I really relate to the genre. Like another example would be to me like Sifu. Some people define that as a Souls-like.
Huh. That one, I wouldn't say so, honestly. And see, that's what I was going to say is, you said some people don't even consider Sekiro a Souls-like. Say that 5 times fast. I would argue that many of the things that are considered Souls-likes are less like Dark Souls than Sekiro.
Can you think of an example?
A lot of the things that have the Souls-like tag. Yes, the Toy Story game on Steam, because everyone upvoted the Souls-like tag.
That's a pretty good one.
No, well, I mean, a lot of platformers are considered Souls-like, but like Sekiro's closer to being Dark Souls than Blasphemous.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Blasphemous isn't a Souls-like. I'm just saying that people don't consider Sekiro a Souls-like, but
I can agree with that too, because to me, Blasphemous, like I've never looked at it as a Souls-like. I've always looked at it as a Metroidvania. Same for The Last Faith. Like I've never looked at it as a Souls-like. To me, that is a Metroidvania.
Yeah, I definitely see that argument, and it's one of those things that at a certain point and in some context, the Souls-like label can almost be diluted down to like, this game is hard, i.e. throwing the label on like a random Toy Story game is a meme, just say like, oh wow, this game is so hard. To some people that's all it means, and I honestly get a little frustrated when I see things like that, just a random game that doesn't really have anything to do with Dark Souls but is kind of hard. People calling it a Souls-like honestly pisses me off.
And I will say, Souls-like is probably one of the newest one of the genre games. Like Metroidvanias, they developed and we learned earlier, 86, technically, for where they launched. If you look at Rogue, that game came out, I think, 1980, I want to say.
Something like that.
But Demon Souls and Dark Souls is a 2006 release. I'm curious if with time we will get this more diverse group of games that have a true definition for the game. Because Metroidvania, I feel like, has a true definition of what that game is, or what that genre is.
Right.
Same for roguelite, same for roguelike. Like, they all have this true definition.
Mhm.
Where Souls, like, it's still a loose determination, and it's only been out. The genre has only been out for what? Almost. Okay, well, it's been out for a while. Almost 20 years.
Right.
Oh, dude, don't say that. But that's interesting because, like, when people said rogue-like, it didn't look like rogue. Like, roguelikes don't look like rogue. They play like how rogue
Mhm.
played. But saying Souls-like can almost mean it just looks like Dark Souls.
That's true.
Yeah.
It doesn't even play anything like it. It just looks like Dark Souls. It has
That
the same aesthetic of Dark Souls.
that's one thing I was just looking at too. Was Exenema, which is a really interesting game. I don't know if you guys ever looked this
Mm-mm.
game up, but it is in Steam databases of Souls-like, and that's weird to me because it's a physics-based game that you're like a dungeon crawler esque, and like I say physics-based, it's really weird controllers,
Oh,
really
I have seen this. Yeah.
really wacky game, and it's difficult. I think the only thing it's got for it is the setting and its difficulty.
Mm,
And that's why people have put it in that Souls-like genre. And
yeah.
I do think we have overpopulated the Souls-like genre with games that aren't truly
Mhm.
Souls-likes.
Yeah. Like when you say Metroidvania, you have a clear idea in what your mind about how the game's going to play. But when you say Souls-like, it's like so muddy what you're talking about.
Right. Which is so funny because the Fromsoft games, I think it's pretty clear what, like, there's a very
Yeah.
clear set of things that define what a FromSoft game is. And there are other games that literally just do that. But for some reason,
Yeah.
like, the genre is kind of just like polluted with all of these random things that I wouldn't consider to be within that genre.
I blame the Crash Bandicoot devs. They said it's the Souls-like
Oh my
of
god, I
platformers.
forgot about.
It's the Dark Souls of platformers.
Oh,
So this is a bring up question. So what is okay for you guys? What is the number one trait that a Souls-like has to have for it to be truly a Souls-like?
Ooh.
For me, it would like. I feel like the world resetting is something I see in every Souls-like. I feel like that's got to be the number one trait. The world resets when you rest.
I would say it would have to, like, you would attack like a dark. It's an animation-based game where your animation is what determines whether you hit or miss, and you have a dodge roll. I think those are, to me, those are the two core elements that say, "Hey, this is a Souls-like."
and this is coming from, again, somebody with not a lot of experience, but uh, something about the boss fights feel very Dark Souls to me, and I know that's not exclusive to them, but there's a certain style to a Dark Souls boss fight that I think is unique.
I think that plays a little bit more into the rhythm concept too, because like a lot of boss fights, you're not expected to dodge it, so like you're expected to tank hits.
Right.
Where like Dark Souls, there's that wind up before the swing. There's the he's stabbed in the ground, so you expect this next move. There's this slight alternate the way his feet are positioned, so expect this next move. Like there's those small little cues.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It almost reminds me of the style of Dark Souls boss fights remind me of platformer boss fights in that it's very telegraphed, you know what's going to happen, and it's entirely skill based whether or not you beat it, as opposed to something like a Mario boss fight where it's more like a puzzle that you're trying to beat while dodging hits.
Right.
I wonder if that's why we've seen so many Metroidvania and Souls like overlaps. Because like if you look at the Souls like genre, for the most part, they all have a similar like 3D style, everything except for when they develop into the Metroidvania.
I could see that. That makes a lot of sense to me. Because like Hollow Knight has boss fights, but I wouldn't say that they don't feel any different than a normal 2D platformer boss fight. They're hard, but they fit in pretty well with the Souls-like theme, but they don't feel different, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, you're just like trading dodge rolls for like jumping over a bullet or something. you're trading them running into a wall and getting dizzy for you breaking their poise and stuff like that.
Right.
I don't think the concept of a Dark Souls boss is inherently new to Dark Souls.
No.
I think they've perfected it, is what I'm trying to get at.
I can see that, and like part of Souls like, and one of the games I consider to be closest to Souls like without being derivative doesn't really have this is that like 1-to-1 basis. Like normal on some Souls like bosses you have that like multiple boss fight, but they act as an entity. And that's when you get into your dual fights. What's considered a good dual fight is like Ornstein and Smough, because they act differently. They one's slower, one's faster, and they have this different mechanic, but it makes for a rhythm. But like it's that 1-on-1 basis of fighting a boss rather than having like a few enemies or ads fighting with you. That I feel like really helps it. Like with the boss fights feel more secluded and more monumental.
Right. And I think most importantly, you can't have a game that's like number based, turn based or something. It has to be a skill. Like hands down, Souls likes are skill based games. Not whether you have better numbers than the other guy.
Yeah, I could agree with that too. Cause I saw in the Steam thing too, Fear and Hunger. And I was like, that's not a Souls like.
See, now that one just looks like a Souls game.
Yeah, it's got the feeling of 100%, but it's not.
An interesting example of something like this is when Doom came out, and I'm shocked that this is the case, but it was basically the first person shooter. And every first person shooter that came out after that for a long time wasn't called an FPS, it was called a Doom clone. And there's a lot of aspects about Doom that are unique, but we don't say something is a Doom clone these days because it takes place in hell or because it has demons in it. And I don't think that was the case then either. You know, something like Quake it didn't really have the same aesthetics. I don't know. It's just interesting how Dark Souls seems to be tied so closely to its aesthetics. Whereas I don't think that's necessarily been the case, like you mentioned with Rogue as well.
I am curious if it's just a generational thing too, because like I was saying, Dark Souls is still newer, but like it's also kind of stuck in this limbo of like we haven't had any real jump in like how games play in recent years. There's only so much innovation we can do. Where Doom, there was a lot of innovation we could do after that. With Rogue, there was a lot. Castlevania, Metroid, all of them had a lot of innovation that could come after it. I'm curious as to why we haven't got a really fine-tuned what is the genre.
That's a really good point because, yeah, like how do you iterate on that?
Well, I would like to counter with Phasmophobia, Lethal Company, and Content Warning. Like completely different aesthetics, but they all feel like they derived from the same game. You know?
So there is one game I'd like to throw in that mix because I do not think it's looped in with them, but they feel the same. GTFO.
I don't know this one.
It's a more difficult version. It's a first-person shooter, which seems weird compared to those other games, but it's what me and my friends have been playing them. We've been calling them like just team shooters, like where you're not team shooters, like team-based like horror games. Does that make sense? And that's how I kind of define that genre. It's a team horror.
Does GTFO have proximity chat?
It does not. So that's also a good point too. I'm not sure because that is something that is 100% a staple of Phasmophobia. Lethal Company is definitely a staple for that, and Content Warning.
Yeah, they're like these games with like the goal is never really to kill something, or it's usually just to stay alive. You have proximity chat, and the goal is always this thing. I don't know what I'm trying to say. The goal isn't to survive. There is a goal in all three of these games. Surviving is just a benefit.
That's one thing too. Is I kind of define the genre about is it's like you're an expendable task force. Almost.
Right. Right. It's like working toward this collective goal rather than the goal being like to kill everything necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
I'm honestly surprised we haven't had anything really talked about on the genre, because this is by far the newest version of this genre. Like Phasmophobia released in when was that? That was only a few years ago, probably 4 years ago, give or take.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, let's see.
Yeah, was there
2020.
anything like that before Phasmophobia? Oh, geez.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's only 4 years old. Okay, so before Phasmophobia, let me think.
2020. So the pandemic happened, and people just wanted to hang out with their friends.
Don't get me wrong, that's 100% why this game blew up. And like, I don't think I can think of any game that had the same concept. And one thing that really sucks for Phasmophobia, and I will say Lethal Company at this point, is we haven't found a game that capitalized as well. And this is also the surge of like the streaming content. So like it was a streamable game. The reactions were visceral. I had streamable moments even though I didn't stream this game.
Right.
Like I remember the first time playing it, like yelling, I'm getting choked by a ghost while my friend's outside the window being like, well, Blake, you okay? Like,
yeah, me and Sam had a time.
Oh man, Phasmophobia taught me that I'm a coward.
But like what I mean by like people haven't capitalized on this, Phasmophobia, it has evolved a lot since I played it, but when I played it, it wasn't doing a lot at the time. So I stepped away from it a long time. I haven't played it since. Lethal Company, kind of in that same stagnant state. It is a solo developer. I will say on that. So it is harder to release updates, but to stay in that main media stream and to really coin a genre, we're gonna have to have a game that stays in that spotlight for a few years.
I think you're right. I think that was it. I think CJ, you may have made the same point at one point when we were talking about this. Is they're just, well, they're all indie games. There's not a single like AAA version of this type of thing, unless that's GTFO.
No, I don't think it will, because I do agree that I think you've talked me out of GTFO being part of it, because like I will say the expendable crew thing matches, but it doesn't match the fact that like the proximity chat I think is one of the staples for the genre.
I will say, kind of to a point you made earlier, Blake, was that those older games, Rogue and Metroidvanias, those are all very new to just video games. I think one of the things that these games have is we're still relatively new in this era of pretty much everybody having internet access all the time. And like playing online games isn't really a hurdle. You know, even 10 years ago, like having Xbox Live isn't a given for everybody. You know, having a stable internet connection isn't a given. Now, you know, Phasmophobia just kind of works, and I don't have the greatest internet connection, but I never really struggled with it. So in a way, these games are new and could be more genre defining just because the new thing is that internet connection is so fast and easy, and it doesn't take a lot of work. And it's built around that as a core mechanic rather than it being a mode.
Yeah, and adding into that, the accessibility of it, like with these being indie games, they don't take a lot of power to run. Like CJ, you run off a laptop, and you ran Lethal Company, I think Content Warning fine, and I guess Phasmophobia as well. So like all these games don't take a good setup.
Oh yeah, no. Dude, I ran Helldivers on this thing though, so
that's fair. That is fair.
And that was before the RAM upgrade. I don't know.
Man, you're gonna be able to run Dark and Darker finally.
Hell yeah. But what Sam was saying about these being like evolved from everyone having internet access, dude, are these Strand type games?
Get out of here. Get out of here, Kojima.
Get out of here.
When I say Strand type game, Blake, do you know what I'm talking about?
No clue. So I saw that in the notes. I was really confused.
Have you ever played Death Stranding?
I have not, but I know how it plays.
Okay, so Kojima was releasing the most batshit and like insane trailers for Death Stranding, and everyone's like, "What kind of game is this going to be? Is it going to be like Metal Gear, like everything you've released so far? Is it a tactical stealth game? He said, no, it is a Strand type game. He really wanted that to be a genre, and it just did not happen.
I did not know he ever pitched it. That is a travesty.
Actually, I lied. There is one game called Witch Stranding that someone made. It is a Strand type game.
I think we need to have a whole bunch of indie developers make Strand type games and complete Kojima's dream. You know what I mean?
Please. Really?
One thing that I wanted to mention, or more, Blake mentioned earlier, and I wanted to bring it up again, is there are some instances where I think a game could have spawned a genre, but was kneecapped very early on due to, for whatever reason. I think a good example would be the Nemesis System from Shadow of
Mordor.
Shadow of Mordor.
They actually made the name lamer, Shadow of War.
Yeah.
Oh, they did make it lamer. That sucks.
It is real sad to see a system locked behind a copyright.
Mm-hmm.
Like so this is why, like, if we think about the Souls-like genre, even though I think Lies of P, for example, is derivative, I still think my life is better with that experience of that game than without.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody is playing Lives of P and are like, oh, well, thank God I don't have to buy the next Dark Souls game now that I have Lives of P.
Yeah.
I think people just want more games, and the fact that this amazing system is, for the next like 25 years going to be locked behind a gate is really unfortunate.
And the fact they're not doing anything with the IP. That's part of the thing that bothers me too, is that they're locking that system of the Nemesis. And for those that don't know, the Nemesis system is like your enemies can grow and rank up in the Shadow of Mordor and become stronger, and you'll find the same enemies like gaining perks, gaining armor, all this. So it's a really intriguing and interesting system we've kind of seen in games before, but Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War have really, really escalated it and copyrighted it.
Yeah. Yeah, they put a patent on like one of the coolest things ever, and then did fuck all with it. They have one other game with it, and it's like $5 every other week on Steam.
I
just wait for a sale.
And like, it's an awesome game. I enjoyed the system.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I would love to see it in other genres though. Like, I remember, I said, games have done stuff kind of like that before, and like, I know Assassin's Creed Odyssey, they didn't really do they did like, I like the games that have that like wanted system, or like these like ladder systems, I guess is a better way to describe it, where it's like this person is a target of yours, you can kill them or whatever, and like that's kind of how that works. But
I liked that. Yeah.
Escalated how it did it, and it sucks to see something I already like getting better and then just being locked.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Oh, I could think of like a million different ways the Nemesis system could be used. Like the possibilities seem so endless.
That is a system I think does expand genre. Like that like we were talking about Souls, like really match Metroidvania genre, but we don't think they could fit in any other ones. That system I think would fit in almost any genre you put it in.
So, fun fact, gameplay footage released not too long ago about a canceled game by Monolith, which are, I'm pretty sure, the people that made Shadow of War, right? Shadow of Mordor?
I think
that
so.
sounds right.
The name sounds familiar.
It was a Batman project that was supposed to be set in the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight series. The combat, it was going to have combat and stealth, a la the Arkham Asylum games. But it had an early version of what eventually became the Nemesis system. But they just axed it because I think Christopher Nolan never gave them their blessing, gave him his blessing. So,
man,
that would have been such a good game.
Could you imagine how fun that would have been?
Like building your own Batman's Rogues Gallery.
Oh my god!
Oh my god! Like,
yeah, I'm about to say, the way I would imagine that system is like, if I wanted something like that, like I would want to play a character that was trying to. It wouldn't be Batman. It would be like you're trying to be a superhero. You're new to the scene and everything, and you're climbing this ladder of constantly evolving villains.
That would have been so freaking cool.
That'd be a cool roguelike game.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that would be.
You,
Too bad it's copyrighted.
Curse you, Warner Bros. Discovery.
Maybe one of these days they'll let up the copyright, but I kind of doubt it because there's no reason to not.
That's the same parent company that made Wile versus Acme, Wile E. Coyote versus Acme, completely finished the film and then just didn't release it for the sake of a tax break. So
sad.
My hopes aren't high.
That's
the
fair.
Same company that axed Batwoman just because.
Yeah.
So
fuck you, Zaslav, or whatever your stupid name is.
Looping this because I am curious. So part of the reason why we're seeing so many like games like Content Warning, Lethal Company, Phasmophobia, and I did mention these games earlier, but like Chained Together and games like the cooperative games that like require you to work like a team, is because of streaming platforms. So do you think the genre of that would be not like would Chained Together and Lethal Company be the same genre because they are reaction based games?
That's a good point. I mean, Content Warning definitely leans into that.
Yeah, and like Content Warning, it's one of those ones that kind of bridges that. Like, it's a meme of itself because it knows what its audience is. And that's one reason why I really enjoy Content. I feel like part of the reason why Content Warning didn't pop off, and it's so sad for the developers. I feel like they had a free like 24 hours, and like they made a comment like, "Thank you all 6 million people that picked up our game in the free 24 hours." But realistically, those developers partly are thinking like, "Oh, that's 6 million people. That's a lot of money lost out.
That's money that I could have made."
Man,
love them for being able to put that game out free, and it's such a fun little game. But it is a little devastating. But it leans into that, like, oh, you're recording a video, you're making a YouTube channel, and part of it too is that generational thing. Like I said, like back when I was a kid, being an adult now, like YouTube was what I dreamt of. So doing stuff like this is fun. Being able to stream that access.
Yeah. It's the number one job that kids want to do over like doctor, astronaut, whatever. Like kids want to be a streamer or a YouTuber. In that game, like all of these games, even if you're not streaming it, you kind of have that feeling because you're playing with your friends, because it's getting these really visceral reactions from you.
Oh yeah.
I
feel like it taps into that just a little bit.
It's almost like being the class clown a little bit. Like part of that reaction you get from friends is about laughing at something that happened to you and everything like that. And like I said, Chained Together, would you group that in? Like Chained Together is a game where you're climbing a ladder, where you're chained to your friend and everything. Not ladder, but climbing this huge like monolithic thing. And it's funny and it's enjoyable because the visceral reactions you get from each other. But I will say that's harder to find as a genre together because there's not really a gameplay that defines it. It's more of a reactivity.
Right.
Another Lethal Company-esque is Murky Divers. I don't know if you guys seen that one.
No.
No, I haven't heard of that one. If Nintendo knew how to do online games, they could do this so well.
Nintendo would be the perfect candidate for this, yeah.
But they would do some stupid shit with the online. I mean, they got better with Mario Wonder. Mario Wonder, it was better.
Oh, that's true.
But they're like notoriously so bad at online games. I don't have any high hopes.
So one thing, if Nintendo did this, Luigi's Mansion as a multiplayer cooperative game like this, that would be that would be such a success. Could you imagine a Luigi's Mansion genre, like a mansion-esque or whatever? Like,
that would be really cool.
I would love it.
A Luigi's Mansion that like goes back and is just a little bit spookier again, like the first one,
yes.
And then has good online multiplayer. Oh my god, it could be incredible.
So fun.
Nintendo has access to so many IPs that I wish they would expand what type of games they make a little more. Like, just dip their foot in the water a little bit on some of the styles.
I agree. I was saying I think they could do this really well. Something like Phasmophobia or whatever this genre is called, but they're so bad at doing online games. that I don't know if they would ever actually do a good job with it.
Mm.
That's fair.
I guess they were pretty good with Splatoon now, though. Splatoon, they kind of figured it out.
That's probably their most successful one I think of. But like, what Nintendo honestly needs to do, and it's never going to happen just because their consoles still sell so well. Like, I own a PC, but I still own a console. I would love to see them make a Nintendo launcher. I just want to play Mario Party with the bros on PC.
It'll never happen, but my God, yes.
Yeah. Do it for like, put your new games on the new console, but then let's do like an official Nintendo emulator that just works, that you can download from Steam, and you pay, I'd pay money. I'd pay money for it.
I would rebuy a lot of like this old like GameCube games that used to have, like Gale of Darkness, Pokemon. That I love that game. Luigi's Mansion, love that. Super Mario Ball, or not Super Mario Ball, what am I saying? Monkey Ball, whatever it's called.
Super Monkey Ball.
Bro, I love that. It was such a good game.
Oh man, I'd even do the Nintendo Switch Online thing, even though I'd prefer to own it. I'd even do that if it meant I could play it on my PC.
Yes, please.
I have friends that don't have Switches that have PCs that like there's no way to play with them those games. Like I'd like to play some Mario Kart. Like they are so related to like couch cooperative and relaxing. It's a good unwind. Like I do that a lot with games. Like whenever I do like fight Elden Ring for like 12 hours with my friend or whatever, we have unwind games too where we're like, okay, we're gonna play this game just to alleviate that.
That's smart.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I need.
Your coping games.
Yeah, exactly. I want to feel successful for a little bit, okay?
Oh, I love that.
But Murky Divers, so this game, it's a newer, like, Lethal Company-esque, and essentially you work for a business, and that's a reoccurring theme in a lot of these games. You work for a business, but anyway, you work for a business that is collecting scrap and body parts from these scenes to cover up crimes, and you are in a submarine that you're actually driving the submarine. You have one person that steers the submarine blind. You have one person watches the radar to steer away or towards like new shit. Like you can steer away from krakens and police, and you'll hear sirens and everything going off. And if you're going too fast, you're more likely to get hit by the police and get caught. And you have one person that controls like looking up what each of these symbols mean on the radar, plus usually the other one that controls, unless if you're playing 3 players, because I usually play 3. You have one controlling speed, how fast the ship's going. And then you stop at these locations, you dive down, you have an oxygen tank, like meter how long you'd be down until you gotta return a ship, and there's monsters and everything like that. You find body parts and scrap to return to the ship with. Or submarine.
Yeah, it looks... I can just tell by looking at it that this fits that genre. This looks cool. This looks really fun.
This is a really fun game. If it is cheap, I do suggest picking it up, honestly, because it is enjoyable.
Not good if you have thalassophobia, though. This might kill you.
My friend that we play with has that. He does not real bad, so like that's good. I'm claustrophobic, so it's fun crawling through these vents this game. So.
Oh man, claustrophobia plus a submarine sounds like a nightmare.
Oh yeah, 100%. But yeah, no, this is another one of those games that like it's some more of a recent spawn. Yeah, it released last month. Is that right?
Oh dang.
Yeah.
Jeez, I'm waiting for the AAA devs, maybe not Nintendo, to sink their teeth into this and make a one of these kinds of games that's a game as a service, and I'm gonna cry.
Yeah,
it'll become a genre then, but man,
I'll cry whenever the name is because of that AAA game. Like it's not Lethal Company like, or it's not Company like, or something, or it's not Phaz like. It's whatever that AAA game was.
Company like, I think there's something to that because, like you mentioned, you're all like working for someone.
Yeah, that's the reason why I did kind of define GTFO a little bit as one, because you're working for a company you're sitting in. And there's another one that's kind of like that. I think it's got proximity too. But Outlast Trials, that's kind of similar.
Is this like related to the Outlast series?
It is, but the multiplayer Outlast.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
Oh, this looks scary.
It is really fun with friends. I'm not going to lie to you. There are some real good moments.
Outlast was scary. Cannot imagine this.
There is a lot of moments of being like, hey, you just attract all their attention. I'm going to sneak up out of here because I got the main part. And your friend just screaming down the hall as you're trying to sneak out.
I've looked up some images and I found what appears to be a blood sprinkler with a disco ball in a room full of mannequins in a church.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like my kind of party.
Exactly.
Oh.
But there's another game I was thinking of that's kind of similar to that concept. And this is a game we haven't discussed a little bit. A genre that evolved. You guys remember that game?
Vaguely.
Was that like the Monster Hunter type thing?
It's a monster. It's the asymmetric style game where you have a team of 4 versus a team of 1.
Yes.
It created a genre. Kind of like, I'm sure there was stuff before Evolve, but Evolve's the one that kind of kicked it off. The biggest one to date now, though, is Dead by Daylight. That's that style.
Asymmetric multiplayer. Wasn't there a Alien vs Predator type game like that?
There was, yes. I do not remember what it was though.
Yeah.
There's also there was games similar to that asymmetrical, like where one person played a monster and you had a team you're facing. Like Left 4 Dead 2 did that, I think, or Left 4 Dead 1, where you could play the infected. And then what else? There's a new one that came out. There was Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I know a lot of. There was Ash from the Evil Dead. There's a lot of horror movies that are trying to take a piece of the Dead by Daylight action. But
I've noticed that.
That's also another game that hasn't, even though it is a newer genre of such, it hasn't defined itself besides just asymmetrical multiplayer.
Right. Oh, they feel very similar. It's just that in some cases an AI is the enemy. In some cases it's just a person.
Yeah. I wonder if part of it is maybe it's just not enough to define itself as a genre. Like the asymmetric, one person stronger versus these 4 weaker people, if they work together, they get out, isn't enough. Same with Lethal Company not having maybe enough. Well, I do think Lethal Company probably does have enough to be a genre. Maybe that's part of the thing holding it back, though.
I could see that as well. All right. I say we start wrapping it up. Any closing thoughts on genre, Dark Souls, etc.?
Not every game is a Souls-like.
Wrong. Try again.
If Steam had it said every game.
Every game is a Souls-like if you're bad enough.
That's fair, yeah. That Toy Story game is a Souls-like.
I'm going to live by that creed from now on.
My biggest thing is I feel like I'm taking away from this is it genre. Like Souls-like, it shouldn't have necessarily been defined as a genre. I think Souls-like kind of falls in that same category as Lethal Company, and as it falls in with I forget the other game genre we're talking about. Like Chained Together is kind of a new genre popping up as well, where they're not enough to define itself. So I don't think Souls-like should have ever been its own genre. While Metroidvania, I do think it had enough time to evolve into what it is, and it could define itself. And like a Doom clone's had enough time to evolve into what they are. Like we don't hear today though Doom clone, because nothing truly is a Doom clone anymore. Considering a lot of it's a lot of Doom clones are now like Halo clones, if that makes sense, or such. It's a first-person shooter.
Yeah, I want to find who said Souls-like first, so I can point my finger at them and waggle my finger and say, no.
Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
You don't know what you're doing.
But yeah, no. I think big question of the week was I misread it earlier. The question of the week is, what does it mean for a series to become a genre? But I do want to follow it up with what is a Souls-like?
Yeah. What does that actually mean? To you?
Mm-hmm. What does it mean to the industry? If you work in the industry, I want to know.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Well, thanks for jumping on, Blake. If you want to find him, we're going to have his links to his Twitch channel in the description. I know every now and then CJ will jump on and do a stream with him, which is pretty cool.
And I should be streaming some more soon. I'm thinking about starting back at my RL1. You guys can see me fight a sunflower for another 12 hours.
Hell yeah.
If you don't know what a Souls-like is and you want to go see what a Souls-like is, jump on twitch.tv/TerrificBlake because he'll show you what a Souls-like is.
All right. This has been Systems in Play, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Fucking dogs.
The gun.